I gave her the main one. I thought we could keep these. This is the only one that has all the attachments. And then we'll do
Stuff in the ballot box?
As I gotta look at the resolution.
You said that paper ballots were the best way.
Planning Commission for the City of Wilsonville, Wednesday, February 13, 2019 is now in session. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Chair Greenfield,
Here.
Vice Chair Postma,
Here.
Cameron Mesbah,
Here.
Phyllis Millen,
Here.
Simon Springall, Ron Heberlein,
Here.
Peter Hurley.
Here.
Thank you.
Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You can have the honor of running as many ballots as you want.
Good evening. This is a time that we set aside in our monthly meeting for citizens to have the opportunity to address the Planning Commission regarding any item that is not already scheduled for a formal public hearing tonight. We have 2 public hearings scheduled. If any member of the audience would like to speak about any work session item or any other matter of concern, please raise your hand so that we may hear from you now. There will be an opportunity for comments and questions in the course of our 2 hearings. And this is an annual occasion for the council to, the commission to reorganize itself with an election of a chair and vice chair. And I'll ask our assistant city attorney to conduct the election, please.
Thank you, Chair Greenfield. So as the commission may remember, you will be electing both a chair and vice chair. So we'll handle the chair position first. That way, if anyone who runs for chair wants to also run for vice chair, you have that option after the chair election. So how we'll start out is we'll open it up for nominations for chair. Once we have all the nominations, then we will vote on the chair. And then once that the chair is elected, then we'll move on with the same process for the vice chair. So we'll open it up for nominations for the chair position.
I would like to nominate Mr. Greenfield as chair.
So Chair Greenfield has been nominated to continue on as chair.
I'll second that.
Any other nominations? Okay, well, so we'll go ahead and close nominations. Go ahead and write down your vote for chair.
I guess so.
And I'll come around and collect them.
Yeah, you should fold it. In this
Oh, yeah, I was gonna fold it.
Secret ballot kind of goes out the window. The anticipation. The suspense, is it right?
know.
Oh.
Unsurprisingly, Chair Greenfield has been nominated to serve, or has been voted to serve as another year as chair of the Planning Commission.
There was no invalid ballots?
Not this time, surprisingly.
Thank
No
you all very
recounts
much.
needed.
11 votes, but sure. It was me.
So with that, we'll open nominations for vice chair.
I'll nominate Commissioner Postma for vice chair.
Second.
Commissioner Postma has been nominated for vice chair. Any other nominations? Okay, with that, we'll close nominations and go ahead and write on your piece of paper your vote for vice chair. And with that, Vice Chair Postma has been elected for another one-year term as Vice Chair for the Commission. Thank you.
And thank you. We're back in normal session, and we move on to consideration of the January 9th Planning Commission minutes. Are there any additions or corrections that need to be noted? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as distributed. We now move on to our first legislative hearing of the evening. This is a hearing on the Basalt Creek Comprehensive Plan and Transportation System Plan amendments. Matters before the Planning Commission involve legislative public hearings. These are somewhat different than the quasi-judicial hearings conducted by the city's Development Review Board. The Planning Commission would like to hear from anyone who has testimony to offer that is relevant to the issues before the Planning Commission. If you wish to testify tonight, please fill out one of the yellow cards on the side table and make sure that it's given to a member of the staff, I would say to the clerk. Because your testimony gives you legal standing in the matter for which you're testifying, it is important that you provide your full name and address on the testimony card or at the beginning of your comments. When you testify, please address your comments to the criteria that will be reviewed by the city staff at the start of the hearing. Some of the issues that come before the Planning Commission are fairly complicated. For that reason, we especially appreciate any specific recommendations or suggestions you may have. We will ask you to avoid redundant testimony. If you agree with testimony that has already been given, just tell us that. If we have a large number of people interested in testifying, we may limit the time allotted to each. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and your address, or if you prefer not to state your address aloud in the public forum, state your address state that your address is as provided on the testimony card you submitted for the record, and speak into the microphone, please. At the end of your testimony, members of the commission may have questions for you. Thank you for taking time to come here tonight and help us to deal with these issues. With that, I invite Ms. Bachel to introduce our presenters.
Thank you, Chair Greenfield, Commissioners. Again, my name is Miranda Bateshell, Planning Manager with the City of Wilsonville. And as you know, we have been working for years on the concept planning for the Basalt Creek planning area, which is on the northwest side of our town between the cities of Wilsonville and Tualatin. And we adopted that plan last August. Since then, staff has been working on preparing comprehensive plan and TSP amendments that will essentially implement that concept plan in our own regulations. We were before you in December for a work session to go over those draft amendments. And tonight we are going to present to you the final draft of those amendments, which includes a few edits, and staff will go over those. So without further comment, I will pass it over to Kim Reibold, Associate Planner with the City, and Scott Manser from DKS Engineering.
All right, thank you, Miranda. Good evening, Chair Greenfield and Commissioners. I am Kim Reibold, the Associate Planner with the City, and I am going to give you an overview, along with Scott, of the Basalt Creek Comprehensive Plan and TSP amendments. So what we'll do in this presentation is walk through the different amendments and a little bit of the background as to why we're doing these amendments now. And just want to note that in your packet, you have a copy of the proposed amendments, which includes amendments both to the comprehensive plan and the comprehensive plan map, as well as the TSP amendments, a findings report, which includes transportation planning rule findings that we worked on with Washington County regarding an updated traffic analysis reflecting the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan, since there were a couple of recommendations that changed slightly. We've also included the public record as a part of this for these amendments and a response to public comments that we've gotten so far. I'll also note that in front of you, you received a red line copy of the resolution. I'll go into this at the end of the presentation, but just wanted to make you aware that that's there. We had a couple of minor changes to that. So first, as Miranda noted, we adopted the concept plan for Basalt Creek on August 6, 2018. This map shows that lane use plan from the concept plan map. It's northwest of the city of Wilsonville and a bit north as well of the Coffee Creek industrial area in the city. As you can see on that map, it shows the boundary alignment between the cities of Tualatin and Wilsonville. And that generally follows the future Basalt Creek Parkway, part of which exists now and part of which is still to be constructed. The reason behind these comprehensive plan amendments and why we're here now is that as a part of the intergovernmental agreement between the city, both us and Tualatin, as well as the county and Metro, we had to adopt the concept plan within a certain time frame, and then beyond that, we had a year to adopt comprehensive plan amendments associated with the concept plan recommendations. And so we have until the beginning of May to do so. So that's one reason for doing this. The other piece is we are really setting the stage in our comprehensive plan for future work in this area, both in terms of the land uses that we anticipate seeing here, what some of those implementation tools could be in the future, transportation improvements that resulted from the concept plan for the area, as well as looking at preservation of natural resources. So with that, I'm going to walk through the amendments related to the comprehensive plan, and then I'll turn it over to Scott to walk through the TSP amendments. The first piece of this is the addition of 2 areas of special concern within the comprehensive plan. We have Area M, which is the Basalt Creek planning area, and then we have Area N, which was designated as the West Railroad planning area. Both of these areas were looked at in the concept plan, but they were broken into 2 different pieces for a variety of reasons, mostly related to when we see development happening and what types of development will be suitable for these areas. So looking at Area M, which is Basalt Creek, we've added some language in this section of the plan to discuss the land use categories and actually bring those in from the concept plan and identify where they would be applied. We want to provide some links to the transportation improvements that were required as a part of the analysis for this area and highlighted in the Basalt Creek Transportation Refinement Plan. We're going to identify some additional design and planning objectives for this area, such as the preservation of natural resources to include the Basalt Creek Canyon, provision of trails and bicycle connections throughout the area, as well as transit access. And one of the recommendations we have is consideration of a form-based code for implementation of development in this area, similar to the one that we adopted last year for Coffee Creek. Area N, this is west of the railroad tracks and it's appropriately named the West Railroad area. The text within the area of special concern identifies the need to do future study in this area based mostly upon environmental and ownership constraints that currently exist. Once the time has come where additional study can be done for infrastructure needs, and this will happen as the industrial areas to the east build out, we'll have a better sense of what the cost might be to extend infrastructure to this area, as well as that provides us the opportunity to in more depth consider what appropriate land uses are here. Along with these text amendments, we are adding comprehensive plan map recommendations for both the Basalt Creek planning area as well as the Coffee Creek industrial area, and we would apply the industrial designation to both of these areas. This really is a reflection of the vision that is set forth both in the Basalt Creek concept plan as well as the Coffee Creek master plan that was adopted back in 2007. The revision that we're working on right now to the urban planning area agreement we have with Washington County will remove a restriction that prohibited us, back in 2007 from actually identifying this as industrial on the map. So with the removal of that, we thought it would be appropriate to go ahead and show that to be consistent with the master plan that's been adopted. Inclusion of these areas on the plan map will help us provide a more clear depiction of where the city's industrial growth will happen in the future, and really kind of weaves that together with our existing industrial uses that exist to the south. The last piece of the comprehensive plan amendments are related to the overall industrial implementation measures within the city's comprehensive plan. So we're adding 4 implementation measures that include some of the important principles that we got out of the concept planning process for Basalt Creek. This adds text encouraging high growth, high tech industries in the city, as well as smaller scale craft industrial uses. These could include things like bicycle manufacturing, breweries, distilleries, and things of that like. And also, we just want to make sure that we're getting active green spaces within these areas, such as trails and pocket parks, recognizing that that really helps contribute to a high quality employment area. To circle back on some of the discussion that we had at the work session, there were 2 key questions that came up. The first dealt with some of the text that was proposed in the area of special concern M, which is really specifically dealing with the high-tech employment district. There was a question about whether or not the use of warehousing was something that seemed germane or appropriate for a high-tech employment district. And so we took a look at this, and really where this language came from was the concept plan itself and the description for this district in that area. And the history of that was that in looking at some of the examples that were on the ground in terms of employment uses that had more of a high-tech component, many of the examples that were reviewed when the concept plan was put together did have a component of warehouse use included. And so what we've done is revise the text very slightly to clarify that we don't expect this to necessarily be a primary use in this district, but that it would be a component potentially related to the other office or manufacturing uses that could locate there. There was also a question that was raised about one of our existing implementation measures that's in the comprehensive plan, and it was this implementation measure that talks about the city wanting to encourage capital-intensive industries versus labor-intensive. And so there was a question of, I think we think of labor and we think, well, aren't we trying to create employment here? And does this set up a conflict between all of the other language that we're adding? So we took a little time to research when this was added in and what the intent is. And what we found was that the primary distinction between these 2 types of employment is that capital intensive is it's a type of employment that attracts a lot of capital and requires a lot of capital investment in order to function. So think of some kind of manufacturing use where you have very specialized technology that is critical in producing whatever product is being produced, like computer chips or screens or things of that nature, something with technology. And so, that seems to be pretty consistent with a high-tech type of employment. Labor intensive is really kind of the opposite of that, where you have a space, you don't maybe need as much of a capital outlay to begin with, but you do need a lot of labor. So a lot of examples that are given of this type of industry is something like the hospitality industry or food service, where you're not investing in machinery or investing in the structure, but where you're getting most of the investment is in the people themselves. So we don't see this as being in conflict, because we really think that a high-tech employment district is going to have that infusion of capital that really creates good quality employment for the city, as well as that high-quality environment that we hope to create. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott to walk through the TSP amendments.
So again, Scott Manster with DKS Associates. Glad to be here tonight with you. And just with any types of land use changes, there's also the effects to the transportation system and how the land use affects that. And the first slide I want to do is just kind of talk about why do we need to amend the TSP. And similar to the process I'm sure many of you went through with Frog Pond, as a concept plan comes and you see new land use that has effects on the transportation system, and those improvements and changes to the system have to be adopted and approved in your current transportation plan. And the transportation plan is a living document, so as things change, we update it, and there's kind of really 4 reasons. The first bullet talks about really the TSP is the city's long-term policy and planning document for the transportation system. The second is for you to be available to put in for grants and look for funding sources. It has to be part of your adopted transportation plans. That's why, as we identify these transportation improvements, both in Wilsonville and the regional system, that's one of the reasons we need to amend the TSP. And as development occurs, to make sure the transportation improvements are consistent with the desired needs. Also, just to keep up with state and regional transportation policy and rapidly changing local conditions. And just as you've seen the changes in Villebois and things happening in Frog Pond, that's the reason we need to continue to keep our transportation plan up to date. And finally, it was one of the requirements of the intergovernmental agreement between the city of Wilsonville, Washington County, and the city of Tualatin. So we're making that agreement complete. So I'm going to go through some of the changing conditions. The Basalt Creek concept plan is really the key reason for the amendment, but there's other changes that have occurred. And so this is a good time to go ahead and make the TSP up to date for many of the other changes that have happened. And kind of the 3 key changes that we've identified is the adoption of the Basalt Creek concept plan that happened in August 2018. The adoption, and the council approved the Boones Ferry Road to Brown Road connector in the prior or in the current TSP. Prior to amending it now, there was 2 different alignments that were identified, and a specific alignment to connect at 5th Street was approved. So we're making that change. And there was also several jurisdictional roadway transfers from the counties to the city of Wilsonville, and that was Garden Acres, Clutter Road, and Advance Road. The general project schedule, we're coming to you today for Basalt Creek, and then we'll be going to the city council in March and April for a work session, or actually a work session next week with the council, and then go for hearings and adoption in March and April. The Basalt Creek concept plan, here's some of the required amendments. The first is the addition of the Basalt Creek Parkway. This is the connection between Grahams Ferry Road and Boones Ferry Road. And that project that we've added is RE Roadway Extension Project 14. That is a financially constrained project. Financially constrained meaning there is a funding source identified for that improvement. There's 2 Basalt Creek Trail projects. There's Basalt Creek Canyon, which is LT2, which is a connection running kind of up the middle. And remember, that's just a line on the map. The alignment is subject to change. And as well as LT303, which is the trail along the I-5 easement, just to the west of I-5. So those are 2 trail amendments. Project 3 is the widening of Boones Ferry Road to 5 lanes. Right now it's currently 3 travel lanes, so the widening of that. widening Grams Ferry Road between Basalt Creek Parkway and Day Road to 3 travel lanes for a center turn lane, bike lane, sidewalks, and urban improvements. That would be project RW Road Widening 05, and it's also a financially constrained project. Improvements at the Boones Ferry Road, 95th Avenue. You know that was recently improved, but there was some additional access management and some other operational improvements that were identified to make that intersection operate better. That was SI Spot Improvement Project 08. Basalt Creek, there was 2 overcrossings that were identified. These are their funding sources are not identified for these, but one is the Basalt Creek Parkway overcrossing of I-5 and the Day Road overcrossing. So you can see the extension east of the Day Road and Basalt Creek alignments. And that is road extension P6 and road extension P5. And again, those are not funded projects. 2 other general amendments was identified for the southbound exit ramp from I-5 at the Ellingson Road interchange to add a second southbound right turn lane to improve operations there. That is a financially constrained project. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, updating the Brown Road extension alignment. The alignment to 5th was adopted by the City Council. So we've made that change and update in this current amendment. One other amendment is the connection, the Pioneer Court extension. So extending Pioneer Court to the north, approximately 1,000 feet of Day Road. So you can see this is Pioneer Court right here to provide a connection, to provide an alternative access to the businesses on the that are currently on the cul-de-sac there. And that was REP 15, and that is not a funded project. But that's another amendment to the TSP that's been identified. I think we have 2 other amendments. Updating the jurisdiction of 3 roadways. As I mentioned, these were jurisdictional transfers that were changed from the county to the city. That was Garden Acres. You can see the segment of Garden Acres north of Clutter. Also Advance Road. So you can see, I'm sorry, down here. So I have Garden Acres. I'm missing Advance Road down here. And then also Clutter Road is this jurisdictional, So Garden Acres here, Clutter Road, and then Advance. And then I was getting confused. These 2 are the functional classification changes. So the Garden Acres is going to extend to a future intersection to Day Road, and the extension there down to the future Kinsman. We're changing Clutter, Ritter, and Garden Acres to arterial, from collectors to arterials. If you remember, we removed, in a prior amendment, we removed the Kinsman extension segment between Day Road and Ritter, so Garden Acres is replacing that. Some other general amendments were just existing roadways that have been built and constructed, and so we're completing the mapping that was in the TSP. Just quickly, there was the Kinsman extension, 2 segments of Barber Street that have been completed since the last TSP amendment. We also have the Canyon Creek extension from Town Center, and then the Costa Circle and Villebois Drive connections that have been constructed. Bicycle facilities, there's quite a long list there, but you can see the red shading are the bicycle extensions that have been complete and are now built, and so we've completed the mapping and updated the maps. I think with that, I'll turn it back to Kim.
Thank you, Scott. All right, so just very quickly, the next steps, really just a couple. And the first is amending the urban planning area agreement with Washington County. We have been working on that draft with the county, and so we have that pretty much ready to go. The city council for that, public hearing for that is going to be held on March 4th, 2019. And then that will go, once our council passes a resolution to adopt that, it would go to the Washington County Board of County Commissioners in mid-April, April 16th. The second action would be the City Council adoption of the plan amendments that are before you tonight. The public hearing for that is scheduled on April 1st, 2019, with a second reading to follow after. And in doing that, we will meet our deadline by a month. So. we're excited about that. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution LP 19-0001, which would recommend adoption of the Basalt Creek Comprehensive Plan and TSP amendments to City Council. I do want to note that we have a slightly revised resolution based on a really good clarifying question we had from Vice Chair Postma, really surrounding the language that was put in there about the UPAA and the anticipated adoption, recognizing that those actions are actually beyond the control of the Planning Commission. We anticipate that that is going to happen this March and April. So we softened the language a bit just to recognize that that is an action that is intended and anticipated to occur at that time. The other amendment was that we just moved a couple of paragraphs around, a couple of the whereas statements, so that everything related to the Coffee Creek map amendment was together instead of the whole thing being chronological. So with that, both Scott and I are happy to answer any questions you have or any comments.
Okay, thank you very much. To be clear, the process here is that the commission has a first crack at asking questions and making comments. After that, we'll invite the public to speak. Could I see a show of hands of those who wish to address the commission? Okay, very good. That's not a huge number. I don't think we'll have to impose any kind of time constraints beyond common sense. So, commission.
So RWO5 for from Day Road to Basalt Creek Parkway,
Yes.
would that not be considered to be completed, given the work that was just finished there or almost finished there? 'Cause you said, or just missing a few sidewalks?
Yeah, I think there's some sidewalk segments and kind of full street, urban street improvements.
Okay,
are
so
needed.
just kind of taking it
Yeah, I think
just
most
a
of-
little
yeah.
not, but otherwise for the basic traffic structure,
Yeah, I
it's
think
not gonna
most of the lanes are there.
Okay, yeah.
today.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Heberlein?
Sure, I've got one. It'll be easy. So Scott, on the Pioneer Court extension, you talked about allowing additional access for the businesses on the cul-de-sac. Is that also to allow for additional businesses, or is it just for a secondary access point to the existing businesses?
As far as other development, I might defer that to Miranda or you.
Other parcels that would be adjacent to this road that have not developed yet would be able to have access to Pioneer Court in order to then access Boones Ferry Road.
Okay.
So it would be both for the existing and future development.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Springall?
I don't have anything, thank you.
No bicycle?
Just a
Yes,
couple,
sir, ma'am.
couple quick ones. And it could be a semantics thing here, but, you discussed the, on the implementation measures, 4.1.3C, favor capital intensive rather than labor intensive. And then over in implementation 4.1.3M, you talk about encourage new industrial development that contributes to employment with a high density of jobs and a range of employment opportunities. To me, and I even bothered to pull out the dictionary and looked up some definitions, it's almost like that's in contrast, that those are kind of saying, and maybe it's the way I'm reading it.
And I think that was the question raised last time. So labor intensive, it does seem very counterintuitive, I think, in this regard, because you can have a capital intensive industry that has a lot of employment. It's just that you have a lot of capital that is invested in order to create that employment. So if you think about a lot of our current industries in the city where we've had significant investment in a facility to be able to get the employment there to create whatever good it is that requires that level of capital investment, that's really kind of the distinction. Whereas labor intensive, I don't mean to simplify this completely, but it's a type of employment that doesn't require that capital investment. So it's almost misleading because it doesn't really actually get to the amount of labor being involved. It's not an either or in terms of the labor provided, the employment provided.
And I do understand that distinction, but then when we over in the M, we talk about a high density of jobs. Now we're looking to say we want to create a lot of
We do.
jobs, and obviously we do, but I don't know.
So we want the people and the jobs with all of that capital invested into those people having those jobs.
So I guess what you're saying is you want them working in those kind of jobs versus jobs where they're just
Working.
just working. Well, I guess, I mean, food service
Right.
is sort of a good indication of that. Okay, not a big deal. And then up in implementation measure 4.1.3.1, which is the one right above the M. You say consider integrating live-work units into craft manufacturing area. And I was just wondering why the choice of the word consider. I thought that was something we're actually almost, in some ways, almost encouraging.
I'll defer to Miranda on this just because I'm pretty sure that language came from the concept planning process in terms of the use of the word consider. I don't know if there's any additional background from the concept plan process itself.
Yeah, some of the background around that was trying to understand the degree to which we want to promote live work as much as allow it because of the uniqueness of the area up there. And at the same time, not having a lot of necessarily separate residential at the north end of town where all there is in between is a lot of industrial. So there was definitely discussion by the council that there wasn't a desire to require live work, but to consider allowing it in order to kind of mesh well with what exists up there now, which is there is residential, and there are also people that have some commercial businesses on their residential sites. And so the ability to continue to do that and potentially support the future construction of live work units, because that would be complementary. And so the background behind that word from the concept plan was that as we move forward with implementation is to think through kind of what makes the most sense up there. And this would provide us with some direction on potential future zoning code related to craft industrial. But that's the background behind that word choice. Doesn't mean that it has to be exactly that. Because I understand your point.
Right, and yeah, and that is the point, is that I remember the background, and I remember that you said there was already existing people who lived and had small businesses out maybe in their shop or whatever, and there was certainly, it's just the word consider makes it sound like we're still thinking about it, and we might not do it if we feel differently about it, but that's all, that just the wording, and that's, I guess, back to high density jobs and labor intensive, it's the language. I don't know if there's a better word. Sorry, I don't have a better word to propose, but
There may be. Some of your counterparts might have ideas as well.
okay, that's simple. Those are mine.
I like craft industrial.
I don't have anything to add.
None from you, passing? That is consistent with the amount of, the intensive, I should say, amount of attention we've already given to this matter in our work sessions over the months. I have one question. Is there ever a project which is not financially constrained?
Yeah, I mean, typically the financially constrained are projects that we've identified that there's a reasonable funding source. And those that are not on the financially constrained, it's unlikely within our planning horizon that a funding source would be available.
So constrained in this case actually means not determined.
I mean, the funding, there's confidence that it can be funded. The actual dollars have not been allocated for every single project.
Then I will open.
Chair Greenfield?
Yes.
I got one more just because I was looking at stuff and I probably should have just not been paying attention. So on implementation measure 4.1.3K and L, in L, you specify craft manufacturing in quotes. But in K, you have advanced manufacturing with advanced not in quotes. Is there a rationale for why craft deserves a designation of being in quotes?
It's a good question. I think use of the word craft is kind of, I don't know, at least in my experience, fairly newer in terms of how it's applied to an employment type of use. So Miranda, do you happen to know if that was consistent with how it was applied in the concept plan? Because that would be my thought of as to why it would be,
Okay.
you know, because I think advanced manufacturing is a concept that's been around for a while, whereas craft, you know, now it's craft this and craft everything. But
Yeah, I guess I asked because after craft manufacturing, you provide the explanation to explain what craft manufacturing is. So I'm not sure if it warrants special consideration.
It may not need to be in quotations. I think originally it was put that way in the concept plan, as since it is kind of a new concept that's not well defined, and then we provided some definition around it. And when we carried this over here, we don't have a definition existing. And so it's something that we need to define when we go into looking at our zoning code, and whether or not we apply existing zoning code or whether we look into additional, maybe an additional zoning code type that would essentially define and help provide shape around craft industrial. And then a definition for craft industrial would be adopted.
Okay.
I still don't know whether, you know, it needs to have the quotations or not, but that was the rationale behind it.
That'd be good enough. Thanks.
To my mind, the distinction really has to do with, seems to me, with the scale of production and how heavy it is, how heavy the infrastructure required for it is. So the craft runs from something you put together with your hands to relatively light machine shop working.
I am just looking at the maps. I have a couple of minor things on the TSP. They don't relate to Basalt Creek at all, but since we're updating the TSP.
Sure.
Firstly, on most of the maps in Villebois, there's a street, 110th Avenue, marked pretty clearly. Most of that street's been decommissioned. I've forgotten the right word, but it's been closed and it's not used. It's probably Villebois Drive is a much more appropriate street to mark if we're going to mark a street. That's pretty minor. The other thing is in the Frog Pond. So the northeast quadrant features Frog Pond, and we talked about a pedestrian trail that would link the Frog Pond neighborhood with the neighborhoods to the west of the Beckman Creek there. The Canyon Creek Estates, Canyon Creek Meadows, or one of those neighborhoods down there, perhaps the Copper Creek. That doesn't appear on the TSP at all. It's only a pedestrian trail.
Okay.
But I'm not sure on the status of that. I'm pretty sure it's in the concept plan and the master plan for Frog Pond West.
I'll work with staff to make sure we update those maps.
I recall seeing it, but it's designated as a lower priority because of the prohibitive cost of the building that trail, with very little happening over in that quadrant beyond it.
Yeah, it may have been on a different map on the planned
but we
plan
can
improvements.
check.
We'll double check,
check
make sure
that.
that's in there.
Well, as always, my hat is off to those who produce reports like this so meticulously detailed with reference to so many documents that it has to conform to. It makes me dizzy to try to read it, but it must be a great challenge to write it as well. And we trust that you're doing it well. With that, we will open to members of the audience who would like to comment or ask questions of the commission or our consultants. I have three. I'll just take them in the order they are here. Lee Patrick, please come to a mic.
So forgive me now for whatever mistakes I may make. I'd rather get a root canal than come up here and speak in front of this group.
We're not as bad as dentists.
Oh, public speaking to me, yes. I guess I've got some concerns. When I read the first letter letting us know that this was happening, our neighbor that is, you know, right down our easement, they never got the letter. And so I don't know how many people actually got the letter for this
Mr. Patrick, could you let us know, excuse me, could you let us know where you reside or?
I'm sorry,
where you're
I'm
referring to?
Lee Patrick, 12535 Southwest Morgan Road. I'm in the train area. So hopefully it's not a train wreck, but we'll see. I guess I have some concerns on the optimistic planning of the road systems. They show a couple of roads bypassing, going over I-5, and a little modification to the, or a modification to the current freeway access. Have you ever driven on I-5 at 4 in the evening? Even with that modification, all you're doing is, I'm going to be politically correct, is putting 10 pounds of garbage into a 5-pound bag. So they've told me before, they say, well, we've got this great planning, and they move the garbage 5 miles down the road. So I'm really concerned with the real planning that's going on with this. I've lived here for 25, 30 years, and I haven't seen any major freeway improvements. In actuality, I would say the improvement on 205 to I-5 helped me because I get to bypass and I get to look at all the traffic that's stuck on I-5 going at 2 miles an hour, going down south or going up north. And what you're doing is you're adding a whole bunch more traffic onto that. You're not adding any interchanges. I don't understand what you're thinking is going to happen. You know, we're doing the same thing over and over and over, and we're not really improving it. Yeah, fine, let's be optimistic, but you're going to go ahead and put a lot of industry out there. And so where's that traffic going to go? You already put the 99 bypass on there, and I think people haven't really, I've seen some real major backups on Day Road. And this is just starting. And then I get told, well, we're really planning this out. How many times has Day Road been tore up? It's one of the worst roads in the city. It was brand new, and within months or a year, they were already cutting it up. It's a terrible road. So I guess I'm concerned with road planning and what your citizens will see. I bet you you're already getting, well, we've tried to go into Wilsonville on some of these other roads, and just because you're trying to, there's only 2 on-ramps onto the freeway, it's a nightmare trying to get onto the freeway. Your city must not be happy with that. You know, and it's not just the city. I know the state and federal have requirements as far as how close you can put underpasses in. Well, with that said, has anybody checked into where other underpasses can go? The widening of Boone Bridge? You know, there are a lot of things that need to go into this that I don't think we've touched on. Just going over I-5 isn't going to help traffic anything. Because where's that going to go? There's only a few interchanges that it can go on to, and it's going to just bog down. So I don't see what, you know, I'm for industry. I've got, I work, so I have no problem with that. But it's the planning. But I guess maybe the thing that really hit me off on the letter was that it said in the letter, I could be wrong, but it was a while back when I read it, that it said, this could affect the value of your property up or down. That down part doesn't sound American to me. If you're going to go ahead and say, well, we'll just change the coding, the zoning, which they've already done to me once, and really kind of screwed me over just because we can do it. That's not right. That doesn't sound American. That's not right. And like I say, I'm in the train area. That's a future area. Who knows? Maybe by the time everything's done, I'll be dead and gone. But it's still a frustrating part to see how we work in the United States by, oh, it's just a few people. We don't have to worry about them. And that's kind of what I'm feeling here, because really nothing's been taken into consideration as far as the traffic in Wilsonville already. And now you're just moving it out to affect other people. So now, where I've been able to go to work and have had decent traffic, it's going to make mine a nightmare. Already you've done that to a lot of current citizens. So that's my 2 point. I would like a lot more planning and real intuition into this, not saying, oh, well, we can just go here or we can just go there. Well, that's fine, but where do you end up? I don't want to go ahead and it's like the road that went from Tualatin to Sherwood. They made it 2 lanes with a center lane. They tore everything up. They didn't buy the property. And so now that's the only wider it can get in the city of Tualatin. So that traffic there is a nightmare now. And then they divided it down from 2 lanes to single lanes with a center lane. So instead of thinking ahead, thinking that, okay, yeah, we will be here in the future, in another 5 years, we'll be going ahead and tearing it up, and just like the Day Road bypass, the 99 bypass. Why didn't you just make it 2 lanes, figuring that you're going to get that traffic? No, in a couple of years, you're going to have to go ahead and widen it again. So I guess that's my input for tonight.
Okay, thank you. I can't speak for Tualatin on this last point. Can't speak for Tualatin at all. But as far as Wilsonville is concerned, we have been very critically concerned about traffic load on all of our roads. And you are one of a long line of people who have sat at that table and have made complaints, justifiable complaints, about the level of traffic on 5 and the pinch point at Boone Bridge, and what seems to be the intractability of that problem. In fact, we have made some progress in that, just in the last couple of years, and there's more progress, which is in the offing, which may never really solve the problem, but will already changes have alleviated the problem to some degree, but we're certainly aware of it. And even though we don't speak about it in this report, it's very much in the background, and we're very much standing on the analyses which we've done in our previous iterations of planning, in our concept planning and master planning of the Coffee Creek area already, and upcoming we will be doing also in Basalt Creek. We have a traffic consultant, and we are who's very good, by the way, and we've used them for a long time, and they get down to the nitty-gritty of how many trips can be taken on our roads, and to make sure that our planning stays within the maximum that those roads could sustain. We have a great deal of confidence in their ability to be realistic in those projections, and they very much inform our planning, every step of it. It's not so much mentioned in this report, but it's there, and it is subsumed in the report because of the work that's gone into the previous planning steps. But you should be, I don't think it's reassured, but you can take some comfort at least in the fact that we feel the pressure as you do. And it's built into Wilsonville's history, and it's built into Wilsonville's prospects.
If I could just say, like I say, the thing that brought me here was the possibility of, devaluation of property. That's just not right. And you have to look at the train area. That's the scablands. The scablands, that's where the Ice Age came through and it quarried out, and there's special types of wetlands in through there. And there's not many more in the state. This is very unusual place.
I don't think that, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of the whole lay of our planning process, that we're looking at a horizon that's way down the road if we ever get to it. I'm sure that eventually
okay, well,
the county has to develop into that area, and Wilsonville, of course, will be in the middle of that. But I'm guessing we're looking more than 10 years. We're looking 20 years or beyond before that really comes into play.
So I'll be an old fart by then, but that's cool.
I'll be looking at it from...
Not already. Yeah. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it, but I think there's a lot of things to consider in this as opposed to just, parking a whole bunch of industrial into an area that we really don't have the infrastructure to feed it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Mr. Lightgib.
This one comes with a computer.
Yes. Name and address, please.
Sherman Lightgib, 23200 Southwest Grahams Ferry Road, Sherwood. I would like to thank you for your time today. I live on 22 acres of land that our family moved to in 1990. When Tualatin and Wilsonville were both just small towns, and back before our neighbors to the north were a subdivision in Tualatin. I've raised my family on a portion of the Basalt Creek planning area that is now referred to as the central sub-area. My northern 11 acres are outside of the central sub-area and will be zoned residential. My southern 11 acres are in the central sub-area, and Metro says they'll be zoned industrial. I filed an appeal last year over Metro's designation of my southern 11 acres. I filed that with the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals. LUBA came back and ruled that the cities were not bound by Metro's designation and that it was a non-binding recommendation only. They also said that the designation would need to be supported by the record. We weren't worried about the designation of our land at the time the land came inside the UGB back in 2004. That is because we knew it would be zoned residential. That was the deal Metro gave us in 2004. On page 644 of Metro's record, which I have attached, the record says, quote, "The city of Tualatin and many residents of the area," that statement refers to us, "expressed concern about compatibility between industrial use and residential neighborhoods at the south end of the city," unquote. That's the property directly north of mine. Quote, "They have also worried about preserving an opportunity to choose an alignment between Tualatin and Wilsonville for the I-599W connector. The south alignment for this facility passes through the northern portion of the Tualatin study area," unquote. The proposed south alignment was mapped through my property originally. Then they say, in response to these concerns, the council placed several conditions upon addition of this area to the UGB. Then they say, the council states that so long as the alignment for the connector falls close to the south alignment shown on the 2040 growth concept map, it will serve as the buffer between residential development to the north, the portion least suitable for industrial uses, and industrial development to the south, the portion of the area most suitable for industrial purposes. It couldn't go north of my property as there's a subdivision there. So close meant somewhere on our property or south of us. We all knew at the time it would be just south of the southern portion of the central sub-area because that is where the Basalt Canyon is the narrowest. The land south of that parcel is flat, doesn't have the basalt cap, and ODOT makes these decisions based on price and costs of construction. They picked the area where the canyon was the narrowest because bridges cost a lot more than a road. Once they picked that very site as the Basalt Creek Parkway, which is the connector for the area, we believed that our land would be residential. Then suddenly it wasn't. The promise was reneged upon. Nearly all of the property owners in the central sub-area either live on their land or have their family living on their land. I happen to be there 29 years. I'm one of the newer of the 9 people. Our region is in a housing crisis, a shortage of housing. The most recent Metro calculations show that there is no need for additional industrial land. I ask that the Wilsonville Planning Commission support a residential designation for the central sub-area of Basalt Creek. Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, sorry, excuse me. Where does your property lie in relation to the Basalt Creek Parkway?
Well, in feet, I'm probably 800 feet north.
Okay.
Maybe 600 feet. 600 to 800 feet north is the south part of my property.
So this is a question for staff, I guess. Is that even within our jurisdiction, that property? I think it's City of Tualatin or Washington County.
That property is in the City of Tualatin portion of the Basalt Creek planning area.
Right. So the edge of Wilsonville, in fact, is the Basalt Creek path,
as according to the concept plan that we adopted, the Basalt Creek Parkway and Green Hill Lane will serve as the boundary between the two cities, the future boundary between the two cities.
Yeah.
And the property that's being discussed is adjacent, isn't it adjacent to the southern portion of City of Tualatin, your northern parcel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the northern parcel is adjacent to existing City of Tualatin property that's being...
Which is all residential housing.
Discussing.
And I understood, according to, in fact, this concept map that has some element of Tualatin's plan on it. I mean, obviously, we can't influence Tualatin's plan directly here, but that's marked as low-density residential north of Basalt Parkway, unless I'm misunderstood. Oh, there's a manufacturing plant as well, a park as well. I see. I'm sorry. So along Boones Ferry Road, it's residential, and along Graham's Ferry Road, it's industrial. I see now.
Yes.
Okay. So, but nevertheless, I don't know that we can influence that designation directly here because it's within the proposed area that Tualatin.
And I can see why you would say that. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, we in what's soon to be Tualatin have seen the Wilsonville City Council be very aggressive in telling Tualatin and us as residents what is best for our land. Overly aggressive, frankly, for land that is not going to be in the city of Wilsonville. So the purpose of my being here today is to say, please take a look at the most recent Metro studies, which show that housing is much more needed. And for the next 20 years, they're not looking for any more industrial land to come in. These are the most recent Metro studies out since August of last year. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Lightgib, can I ask you a question before you walk away? Right here.
There, okay, yes.
I just want to make sure, we have gotten some written testimony from Peter Watts, who I presume is your attorney, is that correct?
Yes and no.
Okay. The reason I asked that is because you made mention to an attachment, and then Mr. Watts' written indication says that he wanted to incorporate some semblance of testimony before Metro. And I want to make sure that we have all the documentation you're speaking of, because we don't have any attachments, and I want to make sure we've got everything you're talking about.
I would suggest that maybe Peter Watts, who is sitting behind me, be the next one to speak, and he can answer your questions much better than I.
He certainly can, but you did also reference an attachment as well.
So Commissioner Postma, I do want to clarify that there were a series of attachments that were submitted to the testimony, but only one copy provided. So we distributed the testimony to all of you. We have a copy, and we can share this with you following the meeting. We can scan it and provide it electronically.
And it will be in the record.
That's what I was about to say, as long as we're designating that as a portion for the record.
Yes.
That was my biggest concern, is making sure that we're full on the record here. So
Page
that
644 makes for very good reading. All right. Question? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Watts, do you have additional information to add?
Yes, I'm Peter Watts, 1750 Southwest Tribal Way, Portland, Oregon, and I'm not Sherman's attorney. I'm a property owner that represent myself. We both filed LUBA appeals. LUBA joined our appeals, and so we're somewhat connected at the hip throughout all this and have become friendly. We didn't know each other previously, but I'm solely representing myself. My property is south of Sherman's. It's located adjacent to the Basalt Creek Parkway. The reason that I didn't submit all the attachments to you is because it's like 160 pages, double-sided. But the reason I'm submitting it to Wilsonville is I think there's been some doubt as to where the boundary has been. Some of the city councilors have said that if Tualatin didn't adopt industrial designation, that maybe the property should be in Wilsonville instead. And also because after we got our LUBA ruling, I wanted to make sure that both cities had identical records as this process moves forward. Because at least in my reading of their decision, they determined that Metro's determination was non-binding and that the cities, be it Tualatin, Wilsonville, or some combination, would have to make a decision based on the record in total. So thank you for your time this evening. This has certainly been a eye-opening process for me and a lot of information, and just compliments to your staff. You have a incredibly competent staff, and they do a great job, even when they disagree with what I think the designation should be, which I think that if we're looking at this purely on the basis of the land features, then it should be residential given the slope and topography of the property. So thank you for your time, and good luck with everything.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, I can answer them.
Does the staff have any response? Thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the commission on the, yes. Have you completed a card?
No, I came in a little bit. My name is Scott Schamberg. I reside at 23975 Southwest Boones Ferry Road.
Following your testimony, if you would, pass one to the clerk.
All right. So I am now in Wilsonville. My mailing address is Tualatin. I'm right there at the bullseye, the intersection of Green Hill Lane. Do you guys know where I'm at 23975 Southwest Boones Ferry Road? Okay, I'm underneath the bridge for the main arterial coming through. What I'd like to find out, and the reason why I'm here tonight, is just to be heard, and I'd like to ask a question. When can we expect someone to contact us about the value of our property, acquisitions of our property, I have a business, I have several businesses. I would like to know what's going to happen. We've just been in limbo, and we've just been kind of wondering what's going on for years and years now. I've lived here in the area exactly 27 years, and you know, I'm a businessman, I have employees, and I just want to know what's going on. So I just hate this kind of limbo thing. You know, it's been a surprise to me. All of a sudden, I'm going to have bike paths through my property. And it's going to be an estuary, a nature park, and all of this stuff. And no one's contacted me. No one said anything about it. And so I'm just coming to the meetings and finding this stuff out. Want to know when I can expect to hear from somebody. Also, one of the other fellows before me mentioned about the roads and such. You know, we suffered through a couple years of the Boones Ferry Road being widened. They took a 2-lane road in front of our place and had freeway-size industrial compactors and stuff, and caused both our wells to have sediment fall into them. And they took a 2-lane road and made another 2-lane road with a center lane that seems like no one ever uses. So, you know, I'm for making the roads wider. I'm for the expressway and making things go faster and traffic. You know, I have to drive around traffic and do service calls daily. So I'm a complainer about the traffic too. So, but I just like to know what's going on, and no one's talking to me. I'm a busy businessman, and I speak for my neighbor also, Jim Odoms. We're both in the bullseye of this. And so now we're Wilsonites. Is that what we're called? All right, so someone could contact me and answer some questions. When can you guys maybe answer when can we expect someone to contact us about acquisitions or property values up or down? We're kind of spooked here a little bit.
Can staff throw any light on this?
So the Washington County is lead on the road extension, the Basalt Creek Parkway extension from Grahams Ferry Road to Boones Ferry Road. They have recently been in contact with us because they just went through securing the contract process, which actually goes through the state. So the county doesn't actually do the full contracting. But they just had a meeting with ODOT a couple weeks ago and reached out to staff in order to talk to us about the extension and the alignment of that. They still need to do the next phase of environmental review and design work and looking at the precise alignment of that. And they are actually currently being scheduled to come to do a work session with our city council as well as Tualatin City Council to talk about the timeline for that project. So if they haven't been in touch yet, it seems like they should be very shortly.
I should hope so. We've been hearing things like it's supposed to happen this year, and then I've heard, oh, it's going to be another 5 or 7 years, and it might not happen at all. And we've just been hearing this for a long time now.
Yeah, they're starting the design work this year. I know that is about a year behind schedule from when we initially expected this contracting process to start. That process alone, I'm not quite sure how long that's going to take. That's one of the things they'll be talking to our council about, is the timeline for just doing the alignment study. But even beyond doing the alignment study, then there's the time for getting the funding to construct and then getting to the construction phase. So that's probably why there's a significant timeline or a wide timeline for it, because some of that is unknown until we determine how much it's going to cost and how much funding we can get, because there's going to be a need to get funding from other sources beyond just the local cities, given it's a huge regional investment.
So there's no funding yet for this arterial?
My understanding is there's funding for the design work, and there may be funding for acquisition through regional flexible funds, but I am not clear on that. That is a question that Washington County will have to answer.
Can we please provide Mr. Schamberg with the contacts at Washington County?
Absolutely.
So that rather than him continuing to wait for a communication, he can proactively reach out to them and maybe start a conversation with them? Would that be helpful, sir?
That'd be helpful, yeah.
Okay, great.
And I still have your contact information, so I will reach out.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to the commission on this matter? Anyone on the council, on the commission, have anything to add? Then I will close this public hearing. There it is. I didn't use it to begin the public hearing, but I'm supposed to. We now move on to the second public hearing of the evening.
Wait.
We've got to discuss and vote yet, too.
Yeah, someone needs to make a motion.
Doesn't it? Yes. Okay. So, not having assigned it to anyone, I move that the Planning Commission adopt LP 19-0001, recommending approval of the Basalt Creek Comprehensive Plan and TSP amendments.
Just to clarify, Chair Greenfield, are you moving on the resolution as amended, as the red line that's been provided?
I will make that. I move the Planning Commission adopt LP 19001 as amended, recommending approval of the Basalt Creek Comprehensive Plan and TSP amendments.
Before we second that, we had also had some suggested changes to the TSP by Commissioner Springall as well. Was there something else?
Deleting 110th from the maps, which has been vacated, which is it's always weird to talk about a road taking a vacation, right? And then there was the small trail connection in the Frog Pond Master Plan connecting to the Canyon Creek Road side of the canyon. So those were the two that I wrote down as you were.
Are they in fact missing?
That little connection does appear to be missing, so we'll double check that it's in the Frog Pond plan. If it's there, we'll add it into the TSP as we head up to council.
So you're going to be...
You would need an motion amended to cover those as well, right? Right.
Right.
The TSP amendments.
So the motion is to approve the resolution as amended, both in the red line and the documents to be amended to reflect the 110th Avenue vacation and some the addition of some bike ped trails. Is that the motion you're making, Chair Greenfield?
I'll second that then.
I do want to point out that the red line changes in the revised document that we have really are of a scrivener's nature. They do not change the substance of the resolution as I read it.
It did with regard to the one paragraph speaking to the prospective nature of our resolution about what Washington County and the city is going to do. So if you look at the middle of the page on page 3 of 4, those red lines are actually the only real substantive changes. Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
You see it in this.
Yeah, anticipating.
Those are the only real substantive changes. The rest are, you're correct. It's a little bit of shuffling of the paperwork.
Well, no, there are a couple of language changes, but in my view of it, they're not substantive. In any case, this is the document. The red line version is the document that I am moving.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
I already seconded.
Okay. Those in favor of adopting this resolution, say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? The resolution passes unanimously, 7-0.
If I may, Chair, it seems you didn't give us much opportunity to...
Pardon?
It seems that you didn't invite discussion in that resolution, although I was intending to vote yes, and I did vote yes. I think it's, you might want to think about inviting a bit more discussion from the Commission because of the the testimony that we've heard.
Okay, I thought I did call for additional input from the Commission.
After you closed the hearing,
yes.
Yeah, I was expecting to have an opportunity for discussion after you close the hearing. However, it's no big deal.
I'll be more circumspect next time. Then we do we need a break? Anyone in favor?
Probably as good a spot as any if we're going to need one at some point.
Yeah, I think we should take let's take 5 minutes. Reconvene at 7:25.
get back.
Oh, bring me one, would you?
Back in session.
This little table here compared to that is trash.
Come to get testimony card delivery boy tonight? I was, yeah. I was upstairs answering emails.
Yeah, pretty good chocolate chip cookie. I might have to have another one.
It was pretty good. Nice to meet you.
Fast as I can run right now.
Where's Cameron? Well, Cam will join us. We're back in session. And
I know. Should we have like that trombone? Womp, womp, womp. Yeah. Sorry. Everybody's gone.
we've come to the second public hearing of the evening on citywide signage and wayfinding plan. I'm required to read this at the beginning of the hearing, even though we have already heard it. Maybe I can do it with more practice. Matters before the Planning Commission involve legislative public hearings. These are somewhat different than the quasi-judicial hearings conducted by the city's Development Review Board. The Planning Commission would like to hear from anyone who has testimony to offer that is relevant to the issues before the Planning Commission. If you wish to testify tonight, please fill out one of the cards on the table and make sure that it's given to a member of the staff. Because your testimony gives you legal standing in the matter for which you're testifying, it is important that you provide your full name and address on the testimony card or at the beginning of your comments. When you testify, please address your comments to the criteria that will be reviewed by city staff at the start of the hearing. Some of the issues that come before the Planning Commission are fairly complicated. For that reason, we especially appreciate any specific recommendations or suggestions you may have. We will ask you to avoid redundant testimony. If you agree with testimony that has already been given, just tell us that. If we have a large number of people interested in testifying, we may limit the time allotted to each. That's not going to be the case this evening. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and your address, or if you prefer not to state your address aloud in the public forum, state that your address is as provided on the testimony card you submitted for the record and speak into the microphone. At the end of your testimony, members of the commission may have questions for you. Thank you for taking the time to come here tonight and help us to deal with these issues.
A hot topic. All
So
right.
we are not overwhelmed with attendance in the hall here. I am aware that we are also broadcast on city TV, and those at home may wish in future to come and participate in these proceedings in the flesh. I then pass it to our esteemed Community Relations Director. Is that your title?
Community Development.
Community Development Director, Chris Nemsu, to introduce our presenter.
Thank you, Chair Greenfield, members of the commission, Chris Namsu, City's Community Development Director. It's a pleasure tonight to be able to present to you the final draft of the citywide signage and wayfinding plan. We have had two work sessions on this particular item. We started this back in spring, and thank you, Mary. We have Mary Stewart with Alta Planning and Design here tonight. She's going to do the bulk of the presentation this evening, and she's going to focus largely on the changes since the last time you saw this plan. I'll go through this slide just because it's well done and concise. You recall we kicked this off in April and May. We started with a visual mental mapping exercise, and we had a core group of citizens provide some input to us in a focus group venue. And then from that, we developed the 3 distinct sign family types that we then took into a public open house as well as an online open house. We received over 200 citizen comments regarding the 3 designs, and the Core 10 steel with the rock base came out with a 55% preference through that online open house component. And since then, we have been working on the subtle changes. If you recall our last work session, it was uppercase versus lowercase, soft curve versus, logo placement. These are these very small details, and we've continued to work on those details. Alta's team has prepared what are considered, are called design intent drawings. Those are essentially CAD level drawings that can be provided to a sign manufacturer to fabricate any number of the signs, all of the signs that we have in the package. Again, the program is to address bicycles, pedestrians, and vehicles and provide community-wide contiguous looking and coordinated package of signage throughout the community to major destinations. So we are in the final throes of this process. Tonight's Planning Commission hearing is in the form of a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council will conduct a work session on March 4th, followed by a hearing on March 18th. And we have a limited amount of budget at this point to actually do some implementation of signs. So we're interested to hear thoughts that you might have about the phasing, the phase 1 signs. We're going to show you some new renderings for the I-5 graphics and the I-5 monuments, excuse me. And Mary has some stone samples and some Core 10, both faux Core 10 and real Core 10, real materials for us to look at. And she has, I believe, a couple of more questions to run by you regarding the specifics of the sign package. So with that, I will give the floor to Mary to go ahead and run through the presentation.
All right. I'm going to go back just one to remind everybody, out of that stakeholder process where we had our focus group and got to the desire of what the wayfinding sign plan would be for the community. The focus was really to welcome people to Wilsonville, to help them discover what's here, to be able to navigate, because between I-5 and the Willamette River, you've got some pretty big barriers, so being able to navigate across those are important. And also who to prioritize the wayfinding for. And what we heard was that it was really important for visitors who are arriving by car to be able to easily navigate. And it was also really important for local residents who live here to be able to find the safest routes for walking and biking. So as Chris mentioned, we went back after our last session with you and with City Council and made some modifications to the designs. In a lot of cases, we'd shown a couple different options. So what you see now are the preferred out of all of the things that we showed. The first is the kiosk. This one will have, I'm going to actually take a quick step back. Out of all of these, there are 2 finished choices for the metal. There's a faux Core 10 and then a true Core 10. We really like Core 10 for a lot of reasons. It tends to be a lot more expensive. It also tends to drip rust onto pavement. So we're choosing to use the real Core 10 in areas that are landscaped, so we don't have to worry about staining concrete surfaces, sidewalks, pavement. And we're planning to use a faux Core 10 for things like the kiosk that I'm showing above. And that is because that's going to always be located on a sidewalk, and we just want to minimize maintenance. Not that it's that easy to get rust off of a sidewalk. It's pretty much impossible, but this will just make everything tidier and neater and easier for folks in the future. So not much changed on the kiosk. We are working on the map graphic for this project as well. These are the park signs, both vertical and horizontal. I believe there was a bit of debate about whether or not to double stack text for the larger park sign or to stretch it out, and as the votes fell, the double stacked was the preferred. We also, on one option, showed the logo on the bottom, but that moved back up to the top per feedback we received from you all. There's another question we have about the actual text for Wilsonville. In some cases, we show this as all caps. And in some cases, we show this as uppercase and lowercase. And what we've heard is some people like uppercase, all caps. Some people like title case. The one thing I wanted to point out, if we wanted to, for instance, use the Wilsonville font that's actually up here in the logo, it's a really nice font. It was part of your branding and design guidelines for the whole city. That is an all caps font. So if there's a desire to use that on the sign, it would probably force it to be all caps. The font we're currently using is one that we can use in a title case or an all caps case. But I'm hoping to get a decision from you all today on if there is a preference. We've heard, that's the one that kind of seems to be pretty split 50-50. A lot of people like title case, a lot of people like lowercase. Another thing we heard in the last series was that everybody really liked the vehicular sign with a curve return that matches the welcome sign. So that's going into the final package. We narrowed up the sign topper. We have a version that is welcome to Wilsonville, and we have a version that's welcome to Wilsonville, Oregon. I think we're going to move forward with both, and you can choose as you'd wish how you want to use those, but you'll have both options. I think that makes it a little bit easier for folks in case you change your mind, since we've done both. And then this is the rendering for the I-5 gateway. So this is, I believe this one is the existing one on the east side of I-5, rendered to show a ledge stone, kind of similar to what we've got sitting up on the counter here. And then with the new Core 10, and this is a renovation. So this is actually taking the existing sign that's out there right now and applying stone to the brick face, and then building that Core 10 sign in between the two main podiums. So there's a curved concrete sign in between those two right now. So this would be just sitting right in front of that with a stone base at the ground level. You can see right in here. So we'd love to get your feedback on that tonight as well. Wayfinding destinations, we updated per your feedback. Although when I was going through here, I did notice we meant to add Basalt Creek. And we didn't do that. So we'll take one more real close look, comb through that to make sure we captured everything. It's getting so long I can't fit it on one screen anymore. So these are the tier 1 and tier 2, and then second slide of those is tier 3. But I think we got every single other thing that everybody asked for on the destinations list. And then the wayfinding sign placement, we got some feedback on some sign priorities and some location priorities, and this is updated to show all of those, including some connections in here that led to a trail and some additional pedestrian signs, and then some editing, I think, in here and in here, and then making sure to add the welcome signs at the edges of the new city, soon to be new city limit. And then costs. So we broke it out into 3 phases, but we also tried to break it out into corridor segments, because it really doesn't make sense to implement half of a corridor. When you're doing wayfinding, you kind of want to do the whole thing so people can find their way from one end to the next. So when we prioritized these, we started looking at things that were either more of a challenge to do one at a time. So for instance, the kiosks are going to be probably the easiest to fabricate, which means probably cheaper to fabricate if they do them all at once. They will also be able to get, since they're doing that faux Core 10 finish, they will be able to match those perfectly since they're doing them all at once, because they will be fabricating all of that at the same time as well. So we felt like those really made sense to do all of the kiosks at once. We felt that it made sense to do the 2 gateways at once. It kind of didn't seem like it would feel really good to have one finished and not the other one. We kind of want to do those at the same time.
How many of each of these? There's 6 kiosks?
6 kiosks.
And of the gateway signs?
Of the gateway renovated signs, they're just the 2 existing I-5 gateways on either side of I-5 at Wilsonville Road.
And they're 45,000 each?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's for the renovation, though. It would have been quite a bit more if it had been, if they'd been built from scratch. And then the rest of the costs are for the, specifically for Wilsonville Road, it's all of the rest of Wilsonville Road except for the gateways and the kiosks. So when you look at the corridors, as you go down, if you remember a kiosk being in that corridor, it's not included in that total. And then just so that you understand, like if you need to purchase another one-off, we wanted to make sure you knew costs for each individual sign as well. So if there was any editing or adding later on, it would be easy to tally up a total. Just double checking my notes.
Does the Beckman Road include the Frog Pond signage?
Frog Pond, I have to go back and look at the total for that one, because,
Is that down on number
Yes,
16?
Beckman, I got Basalt Creek and Beckman mixed up. Yes, this is the Frog Pond, Beckman Road, and it includes all of those. There are a couple interesting things where you have, for instance, there's Boone's Ferry Road corridor that's called out. And so this sign that's set a little ways off of Wilsonville Road, that one's actually included in the Boone's Ferry Road because it's really more about navigating on Boone's Ferry Road. So there's things like that that are nuanced. But we did in the report we show an example of what Wilsonville Road looks like when you just focus in on that corridor and the signs that are included just in that one to help understand how they're broken out. But for the most part, everything else is pretty logical.
So since Chair Greenfield mentioned Frog Pond, what was our final agreement with Frog Pond branding? Wasn't the area supposed to have its own branding, the cohesive neighborhood and all that? And how does that relate to the state, to the citywide branding? I'm not sure who the question's directed at, but maybe Chris, thank you.
So the Frog Pond Master Plan did contain its own unique sign topper. So that would be on the street signs within the Frog Pond neighborhood. So there's similarly shaped, but it's going to just have a logo and say Frog Pond, and it'll be on top of the standard green signs. We haven't had any of those manufactured yet, but we're working with the county's sign shop to have those fabricated, and then the developers would actually buy those sign toppers from the city. So there's really no relation between the two. You know, at the perimeter of Frog Pond, you'll have the directional signs along the arterials and the collectors. Within the neighborhood, you'll have the little sign toppers that are unique to that specific neighborhood.
But gateways to the neighborhood, would that be included in this Beckman Road? Because that's only one gateway.
We don't do gateways to the neighborhood. We just did gateways for Wilsonville. So these blue signs that you see at these key corridors at the edges of town, those are to be read as folks are entering on those roads to say welcome to Wilsonville. So that's why all of these major corridors have one at the end of it.
So that's what's called the welcome sign in the package.
Yeah.
It's confusing in the report because the gateway signs, we developed the large gateway signs before we did the retrofits to the I-5 monuments. So the gateway signs were initially envisioned to replace the I-5 monuments. That was what we had designed to replace those. And city staff received some comments about, why would you replace those monuments? They're fine, leave them alone. So I actually did get some feedback from some citizens who felt like those monuments really don't need to be touched. They were created in 2000, just by way of reference. So in 2000, with the I-5 Wilsonville Road interchange redesign and widening project, those were put in 2000. So they're 18 years old. I mean, and it's an opportunity to make cohesive signage. So rather than scraping those off the landscape and building those gateway signs, we went ahead and had security signs come in over the last 2 months and look at the existing monuments and come up with that retrofit to the existing I-5 monuments. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about that and your thoughts about the existing signs, the appropriateness of retrofitting them, what you think a meaningful phase one might look like, because there's a trade-off, right? We're gonna have limited dollars to implement the very first phase. Right now, the city budget has $50,000, which doesn't even give us 6 kiosks. So I will be asking for a little additional money, upwards of maybe $100,000 more, to try to do something more meaningful. So if the budget for phase one is $150,000, for example, what's your recommendation on the best bang for the buck on something like that? In thinking about it more, since we produced the plan, another option could be a variety of all the signs, right? Some of all of the types of signs. Get some pedestrian fingerboards out, get a couple of entry monuments out, get some of the vehicular signs out, and do a little bit of each of the sign types. So again, we're open to all of those ideas and suggestions and what your thoughts are regarding retrofit or not to retrofit, to redesign. So there's quite a bit at play here, but I wanted to point out it's confusing because those gateways don't have a place in the plan other than at I-5 where the existing signs are. I hope that was clear. I'm sorry if I made it more of a mess. Was I at least close, Mary?
I think you nailed it.
Okay.
The only other thing I wanted to go over again was that I really do want your feedback on the stone samples that we have up on the counter. On my left, this is stone from Montana. It has a very smooth finish, has a lot of nice different coloration. So if we do a stone base, it won't just be one solid color. There'll be some different colors kind of mingled in. I also liked the coloration of the stone sample on my right. That is out of a quarry in Molalla. So it's local. It has a much rougher texture, like a lot of our local stone does. But they're there for you to vote on, and I hope to get your feedback. I'm actually kind of torn between the two. I see things that I like in both versions. So
Is there a material cost difference per ton?
a little bit, not significant. I think not enough that it would affect someone's decision.
Is there a difference in maintenance expense? I mean, I noticed this is more porous than that. Is it, you know?
They think they're both going to be the kind of stone you can go through and power wash.
Yeah.
So this got significantly darker in the rain. I noticed because I was out and it was wet. So that was actually a little bit darker when I picked it up, whereas that seemed to stay lighter, I think probably because it is less porous. There were some stone samples that we didn't choose because they're prone to fracturing with freeze-thaw conditions, which we thought would become a maintenance issue.
Heavy, isn't it?
And we did get feedback from Public Works staff to get some extra stone to have on hand in case you needed to replace things. So that'll be part of the package as well.
You mentioned the issue of rust.
The Corten?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that not going to stay in the stone as well?
Well, some of, and most of the stone samples that I was looking at actually have iron in them. So they won't look as though they've been rusted on, because they all have a little bit of rust color in them. That's intentional. Like, I wouldn't put like a blue stone or a slate below the Corten, because that would show up right away. So yes, it will, but I don't think it will be very noticeable. It's going to be probably pretty similar to the Morasse Park sign, because that sign has been weathering for years now, and the stone, it's got some rust color in it, but it doesn't look streaky. It's just part and parcel with the stone. And then I have 2 color samples up there for the faux Corten.
It's also got.
That we'll be looking at, and I'd like to get your feedback on which you think you would prefer for a
Mica.
for the signs that do need to be faux Corten. So that's the kiosk, the pedestrian signs, and the vehicular signs. Pretty much anything that might be suspended over a sidewalk. So.
And there's not going to be an instance where like the faux is next to the real, correct?
Nope.
So it's not like somebody, oh, that looks fun, okay.
Yep, and that's intentional. Like we don't want those to be together.
In principle, I would go with local. I think Malala is a lot better than Montana. No. Montana's nice. It's just not here.
We don't broadcast to Montana.
Not Oregon. It's not Oregon.
Yeah, but our record gets taken care of by Montana.
Yeah, and I know our soil came from Montana, but.
And who knows, maybe that stone in Malala came from Montana originally, but.
Oh, wow.
But it was delivered a lot longer ago than the stuff over here. And then, yeah, so the big 3 questions are which version of faux Corten, which stone, and for Wilsonville, all caps or title case?
Where does the rust come from in the faux?
Hand applied.
It's color. It's not real rust. It's
Yeah. Is it ink? Is it some
It's like paint. Yeah.
kind of paint?
It's
Is it subject to degrading?
It'll be like powder coated material, so it will get baked on. It'll be really durable, and it'll have a graffiti coating, a graffiti resistant coating over the top of that, so that if someone tags it, you can take that solvent and wipe it off.
Why don't I trust it?
That is the beautiful thing about Corten. You just sand it.
Yeah.
Somebody tags it, you just sand it.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
But it also rusts.
Yes. And I did check the costs for, and I've been mentally thinking that we were going to use a stone fascia because I thought it would be cheaper. But the stone fascia is actually more expensive than the solid stone. So, because you have to cut all those little pieces.
How is the fake attached?
The metal?
Yes.
They just weld it. They weld it. The Corten can't be welded. So, for instance, for the kiosk, we can't do Corten, even if we didn't care about the sidewalks. The kiosk is internally lit, and because it has all these internal components, it really needs to be formed into a box, and all of the joints need to be welded. And Corten, because it's rusting, the welds don't stay, and you have welds that don't rust.
Right.
Essentially.
What is it welded to?
To its.
What is the substrate?
The inside of the box?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not the structural engineer, and I'm not the sign fabricator. So what we do is we tell the sign fabricator what we want it to look like on the outside and what we want it to have. And the sign fabricator is the person who details out the internal structure. But the inside is it's essentially going to be a metal box.
Is it like steel?
The outside is usually aluminum.
Aluminum.
There's, I don't know what they're going to use for the structure between the footing and the upper portion of the sign. So there might be something in there, but it would be very narrow. It would be like a box, steel box pipe in the corners is what I'm imagining, but I'm definitely not the expert on that. But the metal you feel, it's going to be a little bit thicker than that, but not a heck of a lot thicker. So they're forming a box out of aluminum, powder coating it. It'll be hinged. The kiosk is hinged so that the back can open up so that you can get in and have like a community board in there. And I envision this as a magnetic board as opposed to a push pin board. So I feel like those always look kind of ticky-tacky after time. And they have to have a double panel. So they have to have another panel that opens up so they can get into the internal components to change out like the LED lights if they eventually burn out, which everybody's saying they're going to last for 25 years or whatever. I don't believe that, but.
It has a projected life of 25 years.
Huh?
Does it have a projected life of 25 years?
LED lights?
No.
Oh.
That's what she's talking about. This material.
The Core 10?
Yes.
I actually don't know what the projected life on it is, but I'm imagining it's like any other, for the faux Core 10, like any other powder-coated material that you have in the city. So like your light posts that you have around town, those are most likely powder-coated. What's the oldest light post you have?
We'll likely change our branding before the signs are obsolete.
On the question of caps, to my mind, it's purely an aesthetic. Well, really, it's a taste, a preference.
Yeah.
Aesthetic preference, and from the standpoint of readability, I see it's a wash either way. My sense of it is that the caps has a little more gravity to it as a formal city gateway, and wherever this kind of a monument is justified, it seems to me that gravitas is justified rather than the slightly more informal lowercase. But I think it's an aesthetic judgment. I would vote for the full caps myself.
This is using the Wilsonville logo, or the font from the Wilsonville logo. So up here with the blue and green logo, that blue Wilsonville, this is the exact same font here. We could have that be the same right here as well.
That was going to be my question. I thought you said that was the official Wilsonville logo, and in which case, I think it makes sense to go with the all caps. I think it looks fine.
And when it's used in an announcing sort of way, as the gateway signs are, I think the formality is a good thing. For wayfinding, I think it's not necessary and may not even be a good idea.
But I think you wanted it all to be consistent.
Yeah, so in my mind, I think we really want to say, okay, well, this is going to be all caps, then this is also going to be all caps.
Every time Wilsonville is named.
Every time Wilsonville is up there, it's
Right.
all caps, it's the same font, it's consistent all the way. Same here.
I think this is very attractive, but it is less formal.
Yeah. Do we need to do like a vote or?
And does the principle apply to other instances of the word Wilsonville, as in Wilsonville Road, or are we insisting that every time Wilsonville is used, it has to be in full caps?
Is the font different for the other signs, the destination signs, than the city signs?
So,
It looks like it is, but I'm not a graphics art expert.
so for, to meet MUTCD guidelines, we have really one font that we're allowed to use anymore for directional signage. So for instance, on this one where it says, "Welcome to Wilsonville," we could change Wilsonville to a different font because that's not giving someone direction. But down here where we're pointing to Memorial Park or Old Town, or actually that needs to say the transit station, that has to be the MUTCD font.
Good.
We're not allowed to change that. So even if it was Wilsonville Road, it would still need to be that font.
So that answers my question.
Yeah, and I think for wayfinding, for the directionals, it would probably need to be title case as well. I mean,
So for like Wilsonville Community Center, the Wilsonville in that would probably be uppercase on the W, but then lowercase, because then it would comply with your required signage font.
yes.
Okay.
But we also have to shorten that significantly to make it fit our wayfinding guidelines to be 14 characters, plus or minus a couple. So it'd actually probably just be community CTR.
I have one question about the one anomalous occurrence, if I can find it. Yes, no, not. I'm looking for a vertical sign.
Is it the Boone's
That
Ferry
one, that's
Park
it,
sign?
yes.
Yeah.
There is an issue, and it's been studied fairly intensively and scientifically about the readability of that vertical sign. And just to summarize very briefly what the scholarship on the issue finds is that from a readability standpoint, when you take a horizontal line and you rotate it, you do lose readability. You perceive it slower. And for signage, it's important. How quickly, how instantly you perceive it is important. So there is a trade-off, and any time you do a vertical sign like this, it is at a loss of. Here, there's a distinction between legibility and readability, but this is right in between. Legibility, readability, I would slash it here. And then within, if the constraint is such that the space constraint is such that you have to go vertical, then there's the question of whether it is better to use the letters inverted or rotated along with the direction of the words, or whether you have unrotated letters stacked on top of each other. And that's also been studied for its readability, and there is a slight loss of readability in inverting the individual letters so that they're all straight up and down, just stacked. However, that effect is mitigated by making all of the letters caps. And what we're talking about here is something on the order of almost halving the readability of a horizontal line by inverting it. So there's a very strong preference to be made for not rotating a sign to be vertical if it's possible. I don't know how that applies to this particular style that you presented, whether those are really called for as so important that we've sacrificed their readability to make them narrow, vertical narrows.
We're providing the vertical sign for places where space is severely constrained. It's definitely not our preference either, but it's an option if it's needed.
That aside, I mean, the readability issue aside, I find that particular sign to be rather awkward looking. It's sitting on its side in a very obvious and kind of awkward way. And the awkwardness is even accentuated by having the curved side. It's definitely standing on its on I can't even do it. You've taken something and you simply flipped it.
Do you want
And it looks awkward to me.
Do you want that one deleted from the set completely?
I don't like it. I guess you get the point. Functionally, I think it's not so good, but it does not translate this curvature theme that looks so good on our horizontal signs. It does not translate it well.
Is that because you're perceiving Napoleon's hat? And you're seeing Napoleon's hat on its edge? If it was double-bellied, it would be like a column. It wouldn't look like it's on its side.
What it is that I'm fighting a only slightly subconscious urge to go and tip it over.
But if it was this way, then you wouldn't tip it because it looks like an urn or something. Like a Coke bottle, yeah. You would spill it if you tipped it.
Or to be sure it'd be a crime to tip it as well.
Well, I'm wondering whether it actually might subconsciously some way invite some miscreants to come and do exactly that, knock the thing over.
Oh, Chair, it's already been duly noted that your intent is already there. All you have to do is follow it with action. We've got you as the first.
They know who to talk to if it happens, Jerry.
It's easy. It's on record, right here.
But how many of those were you thinking of? All of our park signs in that style?
No, that one is literally just for spaces.
Just for Boone's Ferry?
No, just for where there's space that's constrained and it's needed.
Well, I would hope that we don't have such constraints.
We actually don't call out how many park signs are going to get replaced in our plan, with the idea that we're assuming that as part of the park sign inventory, they've already identified signs that need to be replaced. And we know that they've been looking into it, so.
I guess I'm a little confused by that because you do indicate locations of park signs, and that was one of the things that I have comments on is the lack of park signs in some areas, but the explicit locations for park signs in others, and
yeah,
it is confusing.
That was completely arbitrary, just to be able to sprinkle some into the budget. But we can take them off the map.
I guess I would prefer to understand what the cost would be to implement park signs
All of the park
throughout
signs?
the city. I mean, that gives us a better understanding for what the true cost is going to be.
Okay, for every
And-
single park sign?
And ideal state is we would identify which ones we would plan on getting large signs and which ones would be getting small signs so that we do have a true accounting of the project cost.
I think it could be an aggregate amount like some of the other figures are.
Is this something where we should probably talk to the Parks Department and have them give us a total and what signs are wanted where?
Yes.
Does this example have text on both sides or only one?
So that's a really great question. On all of these signs that, if they're Core 10, they do not have verbiage on the back. Chris has asked that, because some locations, we were originally thinking that these were all going to be in landscape, so there'd be plant material behind there and there wouldn't really be anything seen from the backside, but it sounds like there are signs that will be seen from the backside and they will just be double, where that is the case, they will just need to be double faced. So it'll say, you know, the name of the park on both sides. When that's Core 10, that means there's going to be two pieces of metal and there's going to be space between them. So if you like walked up and looked straight at it, you could actually see the letters cut out from the sign on the back side. So it'll, there's some interesting not letters cut out, because those are pin letters, sorry. You'd see the stripes cut out on the other side, so you'd see through the, through the sign. I did it this time.
One tiny consideration you might be aware of, in the rotated vertical, the European pattern is to rotate it it's to rotate it counterclockwise, and it's only the American pattern which rotates it clockwise. It has to do with the same thing with the spines of books. The example here is following the European pattern.
Would you like it rotated the other way?
I think we know the answer of which rotation the chair would prefer.
Yes, horizontal, I think, is the answer.
Should it get removed completely?
What, I would say no, simply because for two reasons. One, I don't have a problem with it. I think some variation is going to be a little bit nice. But secondly, I'm just looking at the costs, and there's a $22,000 difference between those signs. And if we're going to look at putting those at every location, now all of a sudden we've got an order of magnitude for expense that it's not going to be realistic in my mind. So I like it staying. I don't have too much of an issue with its design myself.
Yeah, my personal preference is that I wouldn't have a problem with all parks being consistent and being a smaller sign. I mean, which ones rise to the need of needing a large park sign? And, you know, how do you make that determination? Square footage, what drives that? I would be okay with just the small park sign, especially from a cost savings perspective.
Well, Memorial Park does meet that criteria. I think it currently does have a pretty large, significant sign. I wouldn't want to lose that.
And Boone's might when it gets built out like we've just recently planned for.
Well, and also too, if park signage is going to come out of Parks budget, not that it takes away from the cost of it, but it just, at least when we're looking at all the other places that money needs to be spent on signage, Parks has their own budget that if for some reason, you know, they have a windfall budget some year, or, you know, some large project couldn't be done and they have money and they could do this. It gives Parks the leeway to decide what's appropriate at which locations in the parks.
Correct.
As time moves.
And if we leave this option on the table, it's a tool in the toolbox, and they can make that decision as budgetary concerns are
they might
considered.
They might say, we don't have the money, so when we do it, they're all going to be vertical, or they might say, we're going to make our parks look, you know, stand out as much as we can, have the large vertical ones, or horizontal.
I agree on there's nothing wrong with the vertical sign, except Chair Greenfield has an excellent point. We Americans are more used to reading it the other direction than we are reading it that way. So I think it needs to be flipped.
Although if you were to flip it, you would probably want to flip the curve as well, so that you wouldn't have the text facing away from the curve.
Right.
Yeah. You just have the readability for me by doing that.
Yeah, me too.
I like it the way it is. The other way around, I would have to kind of look like this to read it. You know?
So in terms of what we're voting on here for, I just want to be clear.
Actually, what we're doing is we're having a public hearing.
It's a good thing you don't have public hearings.
And we've now heard from the public, and we're in query and discussion with the consultant. At some point, we're going to say that the public hearing is closed, and we will have a discussion for a vote.
Yeah.
But we need to answer the directional questions that have been posed to us in terms of font, capitalization or not, color or rock type.
Rock type and the
Faux
two
finish.
samples of the Corten,
Yes.
the faux Corten.
But that's part of the commission's discussion, not the public hearing.
Yes,
So
you-
you could close the public hearing.
Yes, you can close the public hearing and have that discussion.
That's
Very
not
good.
formal vote, yeah.
The public hearing is closed. And now we will hear, actually,
You want a motion?
I'm going to invite a motion.
Before we do that.
I'll invite a motion
No,
so
that's
that we
Well,
can.
Chair, we can't do a motion yet. We have to go around and do our vote and decide on which rocks we want
That's right.
and which capitalization we want. So you need to go around the horn.
Incorporate into a motion.
As well as the color of the faux core 10.
Poll the
Do we need to get into the nitty-gritty of the material?
Well, it's not necessary to the vote, but it's necessary for their sake of understanding what our preference is,
I
so.
can make the decision if you guys don't want to. I just,
No, I think,
No, my question
we're
is-
happy to provide our input. I think it's just not a function of, it's not a necessary portion of our vote this evening.
That's what I'm-
It's just kind of a straw vote for the sake of helping our designer determine what a majority might prefer. So I don't, that's why I think it might be appropriate for us to just kind of give a straw vote on each of those items right now. Although I do have a couple of other comments that I hadn't had a chance to
Okay.
talk about too, so
Well,
we may want
now-
to jump to those.
We've heard from the public, and I will invite the commission to interact with the staff and asking any questions or making any further comments from the commission.
Chair Green, should we go ahead and do a straw vote on rock and core 10, and then
Caps.
caps, and then if we have other issues about the plan itself, such as
The implementation questions that were
implementation,
brought up.
budgetary issues, that could be, that,
All right, well, let's dispose of the rock first.
rock paper.
And this does not need to be too formal. I think, could we have a sense of the group in preference of Missoula or of Montana? Well, Missoula's in Montana.
Malala or Montana?
Montana
Thank you, Vanna.
or Malala? It's
Malala, which Simon is supposed to hold up, but
Missoula or Malala? Those in favor of Montana?
No, you want to, before you do a straw vote, the Malala rock gets dark in rain. Is that what I heard you
Yes.
say?
Yes.
Just
It will
wanted
get
to.
darker in rain.
Yeah, for clarification.
And it's more porous, but cleanable
Yes.
and local.
And local.
So, so we have swapped a couple of the pieces of rock around.
yeah, there's one of each on each side now.
On each side, so that just
We've
to
messed it
confuse
up.
things. This is the darker Montana, and Malala. This is the slightly lighter Montana stuff. I've got pieces of Malala all over my hands.
That's a question that I have too.
In drinking coffee, I kind of got some in my mouth as well. It has
Are they,
it has a certain
are they
taste.
equally?
But I've got to say, I'm surprised, but I prefer the look of the Montana rock, and it's also this crumbling.
Are they equally durable? I mean, if it
According-
comes off on our fingers, it suggests that it's not as.
I actually was out in the stone yard with the person who will most likely be your stonemason, and he like guided me through away from the stone that was not very durable, and I was only choosing durable stone. So as far as is one more durable than the other, that I don't know.
Are people going to be sitting on these bases?
Hopefully not. One of the comments we got from Public Works was to try to do a slight angle on the bases if we could, to keep coffee cups and things from getting stacked and left on the actual stone.
Okay.
All right. Any more? Then those in favor of Montana, raise your hand. I'm reversing myself.
No.
Those in favor of Malala. So, this is
Can I
not,
re-advocate for?
this is not a determination I think we don't have the force of law here.
We do not.
This is 7 citizens' preferences.
So before we go to the faux finishes, can I ask a question? You did say that it's a little bit thicker on what will be installed. Is it susceptible to getting dented?
The metal,
Yes.
you would have to hit it with something pretty hard.
It's sheet aluminum, so it's susceptible.
Yeah.
I'm building an airplane, so it's susceptible.
But is there space behind it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it is. It's just
gonna
going
be
to
a cladding is what it's gonna be.
How much space behind it?
Enough for a dent.
For a light box, yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's 6 inches on the kiosk, and but it also has the panels inside. It's gonna have the door to close.
But these are tight against the panels, so it's the panels that would have to be dented in order for this to be dented.
No.
The panel is the structure.
Yeah, this is the outside
This
of
is
a
the
box.
outside surface, and there's nothing backing behind
There's
it.
nothing backing behind it?
Not likely. You'll have some stiffening ribs.
Open
some
space and
things,
lighting.
but
That's really thin. What happens if a vehicle crashes into it?
Their insurance company buys us a new one.
And have you seen
Yeah.
that big one that he's holding up right there? Have you seen that from a distance? I mean, we don't, I think we can all visualize what the Marassi one looks like in this stuff, but I'm having a hard time visualizing what that looks as a large obelisk.
He did have a large scale, an image of a large scale sign that had that finish. And it looked actually better from a distance than it did up close. Actually, I was
I could see that,
concerned
yeah.
by the sample.
Yeah,
But that said, the kiosk is going to be something people see up close,
it's a valid point.
which is, yeah. I actually, he sent me photos of it at first, and I didn't like the photos at all. And then I saw it in person, and I actually liked it a little bit more. I like that there's some color variance.
Okay. Yeah.
That's my feeling too. I like the varying.
Okay, that answered my questions for the sake of a straw vote on that one.
Well, realistically, if a car hits it, it hits the rock.
Yeah.
But if a baseball hits it, you're gonna have a dent in it.
And you have the same dent problem no matter which of those visual
On those
selections.
claddings, yes, but this thing is okay.
Yeah, that's going to be all right.
Yeah, that's going to
That's
withstand.
kind of a 64 Buick body.
Get it, yeah. And another good reason to have that one in a park. Those stray baseballs.
Does anyone wish a reconsideration?
Of what?
Did we vote on that?
So we have
5-2?
No, we're moving on.
Faux finish.
Yeah, faux finish. We have 2 choices.
Oh,
We have the more plain one, and then
We
the,
have the rust or the weathered steel,
Yeah, but the rust actually seems more weathered than the weathered steel.
but the weathered steel looks cooler.
Uh,
Or, I'm sorry, the rust looks cooler.
okay.
Correct.
Which one are we voting on first there, Peter?
All
those,
right, all in favor of rust, the larger sample.
Done.
that has the force of law.
Did we elect the wrong chair? Sorry, Chair.
And then last question was, should Wilsonville, as in welcome to Wilsonville, be all caps and be the Wilsonville font?
All caps?
All caps.
All caps, Wilsonville font.
Yay. And what else did you all want to talk about?
I wanted to talk about 2 things. Well, I know you wanted to hear a little bit about priority, and I've got one thought on that. And I kind of mentioned this before. How does it fit budgetarily and for the sake of consistency when we have a couple signs? I'm thinking particularly the one at the 4 corners at Advance in Wilsonville and Beckman, right? We've got that one that's right there on the corner. And that's going to look very different. I mean, we pull that down. What do we do with that in the grand scheme of all of this? Kind of strange outlier. I don't know if there's any others like that around.
What sign? Oh, the existing welcome to Wilsonville sign?
The grayish ones, yeah.
Similar shape. There's one on the west end of the community, right by Grand Hall.
Those are older than 18 years, aren't they? Significantly.
So I think part of the
Real
answer
shame.
lies in that, the condition of those existing signs, whether the bases are rotting. I don't have an inventory of how bad off they are. My sense is all of them are pretty close to being rotted or
Yes.
pretty close to being
I
ready
just
to
walked by that
go.
other one last night, and it's pretty, yeah.
So the goal would be to replace that. So the one that Commissioner Postma was speaking to is like at Four Corners on the Landover, would be
No,
the southwest
it's
side.
on the
right?
southwest corner,
Southwest
correct.
corner. And again, a pretty narrow band in there.
It's actually kind of overgrown with trees a little bit and stuff too. It's actually bushes and it's kind of getting tougher to see.
Right. So when you look at the diagram that Mary's got, you see that we've now got another one that's north and east of that existing
Which
one.
won't get built for several years
Right.
till we build out Frog Pond to that area too, right? So it creates this weird mismatch of, it's going to be years before we have a new one that would necessitate the removal of that one, but we don't want to spend money on upgrading the other one for 5 years, right?
On the other hand, we do have a public school and a park there.
Well, yeah, but you can see that they're going to put one close to where the school is. So it's not going to be on that same corner. We're not looking to replace that one. That one's actually looking to be removed and not replaced. And I think you got a couple other ones like that too, if I'm not sure.
I feel like there was another one up here to the north. Wasn't there something? Thought we had an existing welcome.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Commerce Circle, is it?
And then we were talking about adding one further north.
And I guess where they're at doesn't matter so much, as I'm just wondering, for the sake of consistency and budgetary issues, how does that fit into this? So I don't have a solution to that.
And I have kind of a companion question in that, would some of this money, the source would be coming from different places, because wouldn't the park signs be coming from the park budget, and like the entrance signs be coming from some other budgetary?
Yeah, I see the park signs as being really the one outlier. That would be one that parks could handle. I also see these largely as opportunity driven as we do projects, as development happens, as we have partners who might be able to implement pieces or parts of the program. So there's that opportunity. And in Wilsonville, there's lots of opportunities to partner on these things. But I see parks as primarily the second bucket. They'll do their own thing under their own program. And then it looks like at this point, planning is going to be leading kind of the implementation of the others in partnership with Public Works and Engineering for all three of the others, the PED, the bicycle, and the vehicular signs throughout the community, and the gateways as well. So, so two primary buckets, I think, of funding.
Chris?
Yeah.
Is there any funding mechanism, like through federal funding, that would be able to go through SMART for specifically if it has to do with bikes and PEDs?
Or transit center?
Or transit?
Yeah, there's a lot of neat opportunities. In fact, the recent Community Enhancement Grant Program, you know, that city staff have written a few grants already as part of community enhancement, because there haven't been many nominations. And I really encourage you to look at that program. It's a chance to do cool things in the community. And there's like, you know, what is it, $100,000 a year now that we're giving away that we never even had before last year. So it's a brand new source of money, and this is a sweet type of a project where you can pick a handful of these things, and that's tipping fee dollars, because we house a solid waste transfer station. So because Republic Services is located in Wilsonville, they contribute tipping fees to community enhancement that are given out to the community in the form of grants. And they're beautification, they're benefits to the environment, they're things that beautify the community. So this can be at the neighborhood level, this can be at a park level, at a site level. We're working with the Boones Ferry Historical Society on some interpretive signs and doing research for more interpretive signs. That's one of the grants that came in on this most recent cycle. So it's really a cool source of funds and brand new. And so one we're trying to think of good applications, and this is a perfect one. But the linkage through transit and federal funds and having them do some identity, particularly for when we can make the finding that the sign will say Smart Transit or be the direction to the West Station, then I think there's strong linkage there. And Smart has a grant writer, so she's really good, and she can get money. So those are great ideas, and definitely some opportunities for us that are outside of our, you know, just general fund types of line items.
And we have other clients that get grants from Travel Oregon.
There you
to
go.
implement wayfinding
Tourism
signage.
grants, right,
Yeah.
and we have the tourism
Valid point.
grants.
And then most communities also have taxes for hotel rooms.
Yeah, that's what I was
and
going to
things.
say, that actually the TIF taxes would be available for that. I know that we've looked at that before.
Right, right.
on
The
chamber
tourism
side,
bucks are
so
perfect for this, so that's
Yeah.
another good one.
Valid point.
Especially for those gateway signs.
Yeah. Look, so one more location thing, and then I can talk about my ordering, and that is that I think I brought up last time that the Beckman Creek Crossing Trail that goes from the Courtside neighborhood to the Meadows neighborhood.
This here?
Yeah, go up. Nope, yep, go up to that yellow one right there, that guy right there. It seems kind of curious to me, and I'm glad that we added that, but it seems kind of curious to me that we don't have one on the west side of that trail crossing in the Courtside neighborhood, because it's where that trail entrance is on the west side. It's actually kind of in between two fences of two homes. I walk that quite a bit. And it's really hidden. And, you know, as much as I hate to see it come out of my neighborhood, if you had to pick one, I'd actually think it probably belongs on the other side. But I'm curious if maybe we don't want to consider having that on both ends of that trailhead there, because it is pretty frequently used. And it's interesting because it's one way to get from one area of Wilsonville to another area of Wilsonville without having to get to major roads and the like. And at some point in time, it's going to be, if we do actually do the Beckman Trail that goes north-south, that's going to be a pretty instrumental spot to want to have signage that it's going to direct people to that as well. So just a thought about one more location. But then when it comes to priority, I'll say this. I think when you're looking at your cost, and that it's kind of got a numbered list, I actually don't have too many problems with the way you have that numbered on 1 through 5. The only thing I'd say with regard to Boone's Ferry, I don't know if it makes a lot of sense to me to have stuff going north of Wilsonville for a little bit, but I think southwards towards Old Town makes a lot of sense. Simply because we don't have the pedestrian traffic going north of Wilsonville Road just yet, because I think I'd rather see some of that pedestrian traffic that does, and visitors who do travel along Parkway. It might make a little bit more sense to have that stuff visited before north of Wilsonville, Boone's Ferry Road type of stuff. But other than that, I don't have a whole lot of issue with your kind of level of priority.
Very good, thank you.
Whether that was on purpose or accident.
I agree.
I agree.
All right, I'll jump in. So in attachment A, page 10 of 112, there is text regarding just the description of Wilsonville, and talks about agricultural lands of the Willamette Valley to the southwest. And I wanted to understand what the distinction was of the southwest when I believe there's agricultural lands just directly to the south. So might want to consider taking a look at that.
Would you like me to edit it to say south?
I believe that would be more descriptive of all of the agricultural lands. On the next page, page 11, looking at the picture that shows route prioritization, the one thing that really caught me when I was reviewing this over the weekend was the lack of contrast in the colors that were selected for implementation phases 1, 2, and 3. The colors that are there on that picture are not very readable when you put it onto a map with a small font, small width line. So I would recommend different colors, especially for phase 2 and 3. The red for phase 1 stands out on the map very well, but the orange and the yellow at those font sizes are very difficult to see on a piece of paper.
And when you say the phases
about the
on the
map.
map.
The map on page.
Group prioritization.
Right, in the attachment.
Okay.
The map is almost impossible to see the orange and the yellow on it.
Okay.
Okay.
And it is meant to, so, sorry, I was thinking about cost phasing.
Yeah.
Because
No,
it is different, because it's graduated the whole
And
way.
I didn't even see the cost thing until now, so.
We will correct the line types, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next page, page 12, which also goes along with your wayfinding sign placement. So if you want to just go to slide 13 of the PowerPoint. So the things that, when I was looking at this, I had questions about. First one was, we have gateway signs at the I-5 off-ramps for the South Wilsonville exit, but nothing at the north. Is there a driver for that, other than the fact that there's already signs that exist at the South Wilsonville exit?
I'm sorry, I was still writing the note. One more time?
So the I-5 gateway signs.
Yes.
We have 2 I-5 exits and only signs at 1 I-5 exit.
And we're talking about the existing I-5 gateway signs.
No, I'm talking about the identification of sign placement. Was there a reason why we didn't specify that we would have gateway signs at the I-5, at the north I-5 exit?
Two reasons. One, there's very little space there. Like if you actually start looking at where ODOT right-of-way is and the slopes, and we're talking about like the one where you where you're going to like Argyle Square, for instance, like that I-5 exit.
Yes.
On one corner, you have very little space and you have a lot of shrubbery, and if you put a sign there, you would actually be putting it right in the only clear view space where you could see traffic.
Okay.
So there's a triangle that your engineering staff like us to keep clear at an intersection. We're not supposed to put trees, signs, other things in there because it tends to block people's view and they get in accidents. The best sign location for the northbound is going to be, is going to cause a problem. Chris and I chatted a little bit about this. There's definitely an opportunity there in the future, assuming that at some point ODOT's going to need to redo that whole interchange. And we can put a dot, we can put dots on there and indicate that they are future and contingent on ODOT construction, ODOT reconstructing that whole interchange. But as the interchange is currently built, there's no way to safely squeeze a sign in there.
Yeah, okay. And I appreciate the explanation. I think it might be helpful if there is the thought of an interchange improvement that may make it viable, that just we identify that there's a potential sign location in this area.
And I think if we add those to the map, we should like somehow indicate that they're contingent on like a future redesign. The other locations where we chose sign locations, there's ample space for the sign.
Sure.
And it's something that could be constructed right now. That was the one where, I mean, it was the one like indication where we're like, well, let's not throw away our gateway design that we did for you all because this would be a great place for it someday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, my last one. I may promise, but I won't yet. So looking at the location of the pedestrian signs and their distribution throughout the city, you know, when I glanced at this, it appears that there's, I'll say, a fairly large concentration of the pedestrian signs in the South Wilsonville area, more centered, but it has seemed to left out the entire Canyon Creek Road area, the area on the east side of town, just south of Beckman Road and into Meadows Estates, and then all of Villebois. Those three areas are completely devoid of pedestrian signs. Is there a driver for
Villebois
that
had
decision?
its own pedestrian signs.
Okay.
Other areas, it depends on the number of destinations that exist within a walking or biking range.
Okay.
So if there are not a lot, and this goes back to our priority destinations list, if there aren't a significant amount of destinations in those areas, there's not a lot to sign to. So we were kind of coming up against this when we were doing the map for the kiosk, because the map for the kiosk indicates all the priority destinations, and those areas are also, they don't have very many destinations.
What's that threshold for distance for destinations?
It's usually about a 15 to 20 minute walk.
Okay.
So it's about a mile in, is it a mile radius? So 2 mile diameter, or mile diameter, sorry.
Okay, it seems odd that Canyon Creek Road and the Meadows Estates area would not rise to that level, given the fact that a 2 mile radius is a pretty sizable area in the city.
And Charbonneau.
And absolutely, and Charbonneau, that's right. That was the one other area that was completely empty other than one pedestrian sign.
And Charbonneau has a lot of signage.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did a tour of the city when we were identifying needs with Chris, and we very quickly realized Charbonneau is definitely taken care of.
Okay.
They do a really good job. For future developments, though, I would suggest that they drink the Kool-Aid, they get on the wayfinding bandwagon and blend with the city's wayfinding as opposed to create their own.
Yeah, I kind of feel that the industrial area is another example, but it's still developing. You know, not 95th obviously is developed. There's no signs planned there, but you know we're adding Coffee Creek and eventually Basalt Creek, and and part of that is going to be neighborhood trails. We've talked, or not. I mean, local trails for the employees, and they would need to be signed, but it's future.
Yeah, my concern was the areas where we've got housing now that we don't have any indications for wayfinding.
Yeah.
Do folks, I mean, if we're looking at a mile diameter kind of walk circle, do we feel like there's a lot that those folks can get to?
Sorry?
If someone's coming from that neighborhood and they're walking a mile, because most people don't walk more than a mile, even for exercise, or if they do, they walk and then come back and call it about a mile or mile and a half. Just for the average American. I mean, there's always the runner who runs 13 miles at a time every time, but the average American walks about a mile. If you're in that neighborhood and you're walking, are there 3 to 6 things that you can walk to within a mile that need to be on a pedestrian sign?
No, I live in Meadows, Canyon Creek Meadows. It's a mile to Costco from my house, and it's a mile to the post office from my house. There's not much in between those 2 destinations, but there are a lot of people walking Canyon Creek Road.
But is there something to sign to?
Well, you've got Argyle Square to the north.
Argyle Square and the post office.
So I'd submit if you live there, you know those things.
And City Hall.
Yeah, City Hall to the south, OIT to the west.
Town Center. As Town Center gets underway, we're going to need a lot heavier signage there.
Yeah.
But isn't the pedestrian signage for people who aren't familiar with the area, is that the primary reason for it, or is it, I mean, maybe that's the question. I mean, is it for, I live there, so I know it's I don't live there, but I mean, if I live there, I live on the other side. I've got lots of signs. That I know it's going to take me about an hour to get to the post office if I walk. or, something like that, 20 minutes one way and 20 minutes back. But isn't this for like people are coming here for another reason? Maybe they're going to one of the parks and then they want to know how far it is over to the post office or something. I guess it's just a clarity.
It's both from that perspective. I think the vehicular signs and especially the welcome signs are definitely for visitors. For bike and pedestrian signs, those are usually for both, for people who are here. So maybe somebody's here and they're staying at a hotel and they came out and they wanted to walk over to a cafe, and you want to capture their attention with a sign and tell them all the great things that are within that walking radius. For the locals, it's, hey, did you know you could actually walk to Fred Meyer instead of driving and getting caught in that traffic? So there's like kind of two reasons to try to get people's attention on these things. And that's why the map we're doing for the kiosks, one of the things it does is it highlights a walk radius that kind of tells people how far they can get within a certain time frame to help them kind of make a different choice potentially. But the pedestrian signs are a little bit different. And so we definitely don't want to have like a pedestrian, you don't want to spend $5,000 for a pedestrian sign that has only 2 finger blades on it. So whenever we put one of those down, there needs to be like, 4, 5, 6 things that people can get sent to justify the cost.
One location jumps at me. I live in the Meadows neighborhood, and if you were to look along Beckman Road, right where the Meadows neighborhood comes out towards where the Frog Pond neighborhood is going to be, I think there are going to be multiple things right there. You have proximity to the high school, to Beckman Creek to Beckman Creek Primary School, to Meridian Creek Middle School, which that's one thing that jumps out at me at this is that we don't really seem to have anything that's pointing to where Meridian Creek is. And we're also going to have a new school by the time that we're really implementing some of these things. We're going to have a new school in the Frog Pond area as well. And then, as I said before, you've got the Beckman trailheads, which hopefully will not just be the crossing, but also a trail there. So, I mean, I see as you get to the north side of the Meadows neighborhood along Beckman Road, there's 5, 6 that I listed right there that might kind of fill one of those gaps.
Imagining along Willow Creek there, right along Beckman.
Correct, where Willow Creek heads out into Beckman might be a decent area for something, because there's quite a few things to maybe add to that. And that, like I said, it does jump into one of those little holes right there.
Yeah, and I could envision something on the maybe northern half of Canyon Creek Road doing a similar thing. I mean, you've got all the schools, you've got Argyle Square going to the north, all the schools going to the south. It doesn't have to be another 20 signs, but there might be a couple of locations that make sense to give those pedestrians an idea of where things are and where to go.
It's just rough to see an area devoid of anything. I think that's what's missing.
When you surveyed the city, did you look at the existing, bicycle wayfaring signs that we have as sort of, they can cover pedestrians, particularly pedestrians who are more hardy and want to go 2 miles rather than 1 mile.
Yeah.
That's very true on Canyon Creek Road.
Canyon Creek Road, there's bicycle wayfaring signs.
Yeah, and all of the bike signs from the bike wayfinding sign plan have been implemented. So we knew that we didn't have to duplicate any of that with what we were proposing. But it sounds like there's still some needs in there that.
I will personally defer to the experts in this with the city staff and the consultants to identify the right locations. And just looking at a map, if there's not an identification of we've got existing signs that are already showing things in this area, it looks devoid of information.
Yeah.
So if there's other bike ped signs that are already there, great.
Well, this plan doesn't preclude a community or a neighborhood from initiating a request or petitioning for some signage that turns out to be needed.
Yeah.
So this is prescriptive, but it's not restrictive,
Exactly.
not confining.
Any more feedback?
I have one thing, and I mentioned this last time I guess it was October, I think. The transit center, we still don't know, I still don't know what we call it. Yeah.
Transit center.
Transit center.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah, but the destination name says Smart Central at Wilsonville Station.
That's the full name of it.
That's a mouthful. It doesn't even say transit in there.
That's the full name of it. The short name of it is Transit Center.
Yeah, I think we changed that. It just changed between what we were before. I mean, the destination is SMART, but the abbreviation on the sign is going to be Transit Center.
Okay.
I checked with Mr. Brashear yesterday, and he was good with that. He thought that was as good as we could probably get with the mouthful that we currently have. So he was supportive of Transit Center as.
I mean, I'm good with Transit Center as the abbreviation. It's the mouthful of Smart Central at Wilsonville Station. I'm inclined to drop Wilsonville Station and say Smart Central Transit Center.
But that's not showing up on a sign.
Yeah. That's just
the name of the place.
That's just explaining what it is.
Yeah.
So when you get there, you're still looking for the Transit Center.
And assuming it'll probably have a post topper that has Wilsonville on it, it becomes Wilsonville Transit Center.
Welcome to Wilsonville with the, yeah.
Well, no, that's not the design. That's not the branding. I mean, it says Wilsonville. It doesn't say Wilsonville anything. But
I'm sorry, I think the abbreviation is what's going to be on the sign, right?
Correct.
And what it says over here, destination name is just, is the official name, has nothing to do with what will be on the sign. I think that's.
okay, yeah, that is confusing me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Am I correct? And
yes.
Yeah, we got everything down to 16 characters in the abbreviation column to take the big chunky names and make them as simple as possible.
Okay, sorry for my confusion. I'm good with Transit Center. I'm not so good, and this is no big deal with. It's on Destination 2 with the Arrowhead Park. Scratch my head as to where that is, and then of course it says it's Willamette water treatment. Maybe.
That's when we got feedback from,
Yeah.
did I get it wrong? Did I get
No,
that? Okay.
Well, it was news to me, Commissioner Springall as well. So,
That's what they call it?
but it has been marketed as such on city programs, brochures, websites, as Arrowhead Park. Again, the name Willamette River Water Treatment Plant Park is less than elegant.
And we had, I think, Water Treatment Park.
Water Treatment Park. Now, so I think because of the mouthful, again, the problem with too many words and not enough actual description, Arrowhead Creek does run along the side of it. And so they've called it Arrowhead Park by default. And speaking to the Parks Director, confirmed with him as well yesterday about Arrowhead Park, just double check. Happen to have both of those guys in a room. So, and he confirmed that is what the Parks Department is calling the Water Treatment Plant Park.
And they did find some arrowheads there.
There have been arrowheads found in the creek and along that drainage by Park at Merrifield Neighborhood Park, actually, is where some of the arrowheads were found. And thus the name was given to the creek. So I think perhaps that's a marketing problem for parks that I can share with them that they need to do a better job of.
I don't know if anybody actually calls it Arrowhead Park.
Because there's nothing
outside
there.
of the Parks Department.
There's nothing that says that there.
There's nothing that says that there.
However,
No, I
with
want
Fifth,
that.
with Fifth to Kinsman, we have the existing monument sign at Industrial Drive, the large monument. Industrial gets closed. That sign could be moved down closer to the Arrowhead Lane where you could head off to the park. And we were just talking to Steve Adams, the project manager on Fifth to Kinsman, about a number of how do we add those pedestrian fingerboards that say Arrowhead Park and begin to sign people down from Wilsonville Road to the water treatment plant. So one blade could be water treatment plant, one could be Arrowhead Park, and then you'd kind of follow both of those to the destination. So we at least started those conversations yesterday. It wasn't completely resolved, but we had some ideas around how to make it a little more clear.
Okay, thank you.
And good eye on catching that one, so appreciate that.
You can name it by making a sign.
Yeah.
It becomes a place if it's got a sign.
Place, yeah. Well, it will enter the lexicon of Wilsonites.
Or Wilson villains.
Wilsonville. I think
That's what I refer to us as.
Now I'm concerned.
Coming from
I'm
Sherwood.
concerned about what a motion after all of this can actually be.
I got to start. We're good.
Can you? Have you got a list of them?
I got a list.
Great.
I just don't know if we're done with the list yet.
Anybody else?
Okay, then let me ask a couple of quick questions to make sure that we know some of these answers for the sake of a motion. How does everybody feel about a pedestrian sign on the west side of the Beckman Creek crossing in the Courtside neighborhood?
Sure.
Seeing lots of head nods, okay. And then North Wilsonville exit ramps, do we want to say something about that with the contingency that that it becomes possible based upon ODOT?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. And then, I think the only thing that we maybe mentioned as a specific location, well, at least to investigate whether or not some signage is necessary on the north side of the Meadows neighborhood along Willow Creek and somewhere in the Canyon Creek neighborhood areas, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody seems to be good on that?
And can somebody, Chris, maybe you can help me
We'll tell you where that is.
dial
Yeah,
that in
somebody
on
can
the
tell you where
map?
that is.
Yeah.
Okay. If everybody's done, I can make a motion if we're ready. Yeah, okay. So, I move that we adopt, resolution LP 19-0002, which would include, attachment A, which is the citywide signage and wayfinding plan, with the request that, that the plan be revised to include a pedestrian signage at Beckman Creek Crossing on the west side. We'll also include the changes to pages 10 and 11 that Commissioner Heberlein had brought up on the record, that we have some indication of potential gateway signs at the North Wilsonville exit ramps from the I-5, which would be contingent upon that being possible because of ODOT projects. And then finally, for consideration or investigation of whether or not there should be some semblance of signage in the North Meadows neighborhood and or the Canyon Creek area.
Second.
That concludes my motion.
Let you do the heavy lifting, I second. Right away.
Does that sufficiently cover the font choice?
Yes,
Yes.
and we will roll that into the design intent. We won't bother updating conceptual
The rock
graphics. It'll go straight into the design drawings.
You seconded the motion?
Absolutely.
Those in favor of passing this resolution as amended, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes 7-0. Oh,
This is the point where I always apologize to the court reporter for speaking too fast. Sorry.
That's why she
well, she's got
records us.
you have a recording of it.
You wouldn't be the first court reporter to give me dirty looks, Paula.
Okay, then.
Was that fun?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our hearing is, well, that was already concluded. You know what? You didn't call me on this, Simon. I didn't conclude the hearing before we had this bunch of straw votes.
We had plenty of chances
Anyway,
to talk.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And we pass this on to City Council, and in their wisdom, they will make it final. So, we have the City Council's report of 2 City Council meetings, and they were, one of them particularly very full. Does anyone have any questions to relay to council about any matters in those minutes?
I just have a question. I haven't been reading all the minutes about the French Prairie the two bridge types? Why are they looking at two bridge types? I know we have some committee members who serve on that, so maybe they can.
Yeah, I had a question about it. I thought that it had settled on one.
I did too, and that's.
There were 5 last year, 5 different varieties of bridge style, designs, and the task force kind of rated them all. There was a technical analysis from the technical team, and then that fed into the task force.
Down to 2 suspension models.
We boiled them down to the 2 suspension models. There was a discussion. It was initially recommended, I think, by the task force to go for the lowest cost, and then the more not the highest cost, but the most impressive in terms of visually attractive to the city. And the task force talked about this a lot, and we eventually came to the conclusion that it should be a monument to the city, and the lowest cost just wasn't gonna cut it for the vision that we had, and it wasn't so. But we also discarded the highest cost design bridge type. So we ended up with 2 bridge types that were, perhaps 2/3 of the cost gradient. But we don't know the exact cost anyway. It's all ballparks.
Who makes the decision?
City Council.
The City Council and the County Board of County Commissioners City Council and the Board of County Commissioners who are, south side is Clackamas County, so we have partners in the project, and it would be the 2 elected bodies that would be the final decision makers.
So are we offering 2 options, or?
No, it's a winnowing process. So I picture it as a series of screens. We've screened sites, we've screened 5 down to 2. Now we're going to analyze cost and design, continue to look at environmental impacts and permitting aspects of the project. So those will further inform the 2. The 2 will become 1 in the end, and so it's just a winnowing down of options and choices as we go through this process of filtering and getting information and making decisions.
And it's in council's hands.
Yes, it is.
You reminded me, the environmental impact was another element of this, because these 2 designs had the least environmental, no piers in the river, for example, and no need to grade the sides of the riverbank. Those were kind of concerns, as well as navigation. You've got the environmental impact and flood mitigation, that sort of stuff that you'd have if you put piers in the river. So there was a lot of discussion about all those elements of the bridge designs.
Is there a funding partnership as well? Is Clackamas County, would they be contributing to this bridge cost, or is this all Wilsonville funds?
We don't imagine paying for it as a city. We imagine obtaining, a wide variety of grants, and we'll be looking to some of these federal transportation projects that are coming. There's something now called the T2020, and different initiatives that are happening at the federal level. And so it's obviously going to be a complex financing package that might result in any number. We would have to leverage some systems development fees to match some of those grants, most likely, but hopefully not come in any more than the match, and the majority of it would be paid for by outside sources. So. Okay. It'll be a cobbling together of a number of different resources.
The mayor is scheduled to give us State of the City, his State of the City address at the next council meeting next Monday.
The next one is next Thursday. It's the following meeting after that, I believe March 4th would be the State of the City.
I have it wrong.
Because Monday's a holiday and President's Day, and then the council meeting is next Thursday, a week from tomorrow night.
I urge us all to attend.
I have a question about the work program, the Planning Commission work program. Is that leaping ahead too far?
That's the next item.
The density and consistency revisions, are we talking there about the comp plan versus the zoning and the gap? Is that what
Yes.
we're dealing with there?
Yes, and in fact, I should report that last week, Daniel and Miranda and myself sat down and identified a number of projects that we'd like to advance for the work program. Things like recreation in the industrial zone, some things that have been sitting on the list that we're going to pick up these topics. We're going to get some white paper kind of research done on those topics, and then bring forward these concepts, begin having a conversation. We identified 3 or 4 pretty significant.
3, there was some work around clear and objective standards for multifamily residential, some analysis of parking, and then also the recreation and industrial areas. I think that those were the 3. Right?
So we've got a number of things. We'd likely work with somebody like Joe Dills to do some of the background research and do some of the white paper gathering along with city staff. And then, so your work program will have a number of more meaty topics than what it's currently showing. We're just starting that process right now. So
showing 3 work sessions on the inconsistency.
yeah, that thing's a nightmare, and I really am hesitant to bring that to you because it's just dry and just, oh gosh. I'm
3 on equity housing.
It's a lawyer's cup of tea, isn't it?
Equitable housing.
That's what Eric and I are going to go out on. Eric's going to love the dryness. I'm going to make it fun.
Oh, there you go.
Public hearings on these 2 issues.
Not at this point. And part of the reason for that is starting to bring the content to you and giving you adequate time to work through some of the issues and milestones. And then once we have a better sense of the first 1 or 2 work sessions on the density and consistency, we'll have a better sense of how long that might take and whether that will require more work sessions or whether that will move to public hearing.
Do they involve any actual applications or proposals at this point?
No, they're just gaps in the code.
Yeah.
Just problems with the current code today.
Do we anticipate that the Oregon legislature is going to have an impact on any of these issues, like the density and the equitable housing?
Oh, yeah. Potentially, yes, very much so.
There's a potential that it may impact our work program as well. So it could shift staff time in terms of if there are requirements that come down from the state mandates that we need to adopt within a certain time frame that could impact the work program.
When is the next time we're going to be looking at Frog Pond East?
Great question. The council has identified a late April date for goal setting, which is much later than usual. So at this point, we don't have direction from the council on the new set of goals. They've identified goals 2017 to 2019. They're scheduled to go again in April. There's a grant cycle right now that's open that we're not in a position to apply for because we don't have direction from council to go forward and prepare the plan. So we know we've got 4 years to prepare the plan from the date of the decision, which was submitted to DLCD in January 10th, 2019. So 4 years from that date. There were 7 objections filed to the DLCD filing. So here we go again with the appeals, and objections are different than appeals, but this is an internal process that DLCD has to work through to determine the validity of the Metro application for the expansion. And it will likely manifest itself at some point in appeals. But until we have goals, I didn't want to assume anything till I was directed to go forward and do those plans. So unfortunately, the submittal date for those grants is like April 10th, and they don't have a retreat until the 26th. So we're going to pass on this year's grant cycle. I'm going to assume that it's going to be a goal and that we'll write a grant in 2020, and then it'll take 12 to 18 months from there to do the planning once the money is secured. Does that sound about right?
Correct.
Anything else with the good of the order? In that case, we are adjourned at
Thank you.
9:09.
I believe we're talking about 2020.
I know.
Thinking like
That's what I kept thinking.